fortunate to have some moisture come down from the sky. In Wyoming, whenever it rains, everyone goes outside to look because it doesn't happen very often. So we're grateful for the moisture for this dry earth. We'll just a reminder to everyone to silence your cell phones, because if it goes off during the meeting, we'll make as much fun of you as we can. We're looking forward to some good testimony today as we deal with activities funding as well as technology, and we'll finish up on nutrition. There's some additional information that we have available this morning for nutrition, so we'll have that first. But do we need a roll call, Ashley?
Mr. Chairman, for the Select Committee on School Finance Recalibration, June 25th, 2026, Senator Brightman.
Excused.
Senator Brennan.
Here.
Senator McEwen.
Excused.
Senator Rothfuss.
Excused.
Senator Schuler.
Here.
Representative Andrew.
Here.
Representative Bear.
Here.
Representative Kelly.
Here.
Representative Nyman.
Here.
Representative Yin. Co-Chairman Salazar. Co-Chairman Heiner. You have a quorum.
Here, Senator. All right, good. All right, thank you. We have a quorum. Appreciate everyone being here earlier this morning. Mike, would you like to come up and talk about nutrition? And Dr. Lucas or Picus and Dr. Brown? I know you guys have been working late into the evening putting this together.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Co-Chair. In Los Angeles, we have the same feeling about rain. We're always happy to see a little bit of it come down, and we go out and look at it because we don't really know what it looks like. So I didn't realize it was quite the same in Wyoming. I've been through a few fairly strong rainstorms here, but it's a good thing, generally speaking. So we yesterday during the meeting, you asked us we agreed that we could probably put together a couple of things to respond to some of the questions around food services. One was around some of the costs related particularly to employees and staffing. And Dr. Brown's put together some graphs and charts and data on that. And the other on surrounding states and how they deal with food services and universal food services. You seem to pick on Mike first, so I'm comfortable starting with that. What I'll see if my sharing skills are better, or if I'm smarter, I'll just turn it over to Dr. Brown and maybe it'll go faster. Okay, I'm going to let her do this. I'm spoiled at home. I have two monitors, and it's really easy. When there's only one, I get lost. So this is my problem.
Nice to have friends in high places.
It was the price of being an associate dean for many years. I didn't teach as much, and people did this stuff for me. I'm on my own again. There we go. All right. Fabulous. All right. Let's see. We're going to shift this right to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Mr. Chair, you asked what neighboring states do for food services.
Mr. Griffiths, would you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. Michael Griffith, school finance consultant with Picus Odden and Associates. So presenting today and talking about what bordering states do for food services and do they fund those. Looked this up last night, and Idaho and Montana provide no additional funding from the state level to school districts. We talked about it yesterday that Colorado has a universal free lunch program. I won't go more into that other than to say it's primarily funded through a voter initiative that was passed a year or two ago. I cannot remember now. And that was from funds for taking away tax deductions for people who have incomes over $300,000. Two states, Nebraska and South Dakota, recently passed legislation this year that provides funding for schools. And what it does is provides funding for nutrition programs to ensure that any student who qualifies for a reduced price lunch actually gets a free lunch. So these are smaller programs, but they're brand new in both of the states. And you can see in Nebraska, it costs just over $1 million. And in South Dakota, it costs $600,000 annually to do this. Utah has a unique
Mr. Griffith,
Sure.
you say South Dakota 600,000, it says 592 million on your slide.
Oh, wow, wow. That is a mistake. That should
That is
not
a
read that.
pretty good
Yeah.
lunch. Could we go there and try their lunches out?
Yes.
I think that's.
Gosh. Yeah, no, I'm going to quit this job and become a food service person there. No, that's my mistake. This is the problem of doing something late at night. My apologies. Yeah, yeah, that would be, so very, very small compared to what I have there. And then, in Utah, the state earmarks, 10% of the liquor tax to go to school meal programs. The most up-to-date information I could find from the 24-25 school year was that this generated $50 million. Not too sure how it's distributed, although it looks like it's grants to school districts for things like equipment, but I can look into that more and provide that to the committee when we have a bit more time to dig deeper into that. But it gives you an understanding that 2 states provide no funding, 2 states provide small targeted amounts of funding. 1 state in Colorado provides universal, and in Utah, they provide additional funding based on the liquor tax. They did have a piece of legislation go through in Utah this legislative session that made it through the House, but not the Senate, that would have doubled this number and increased it to about $100 million. So I hope that answers your question, Mr. Chair. Is there anything else I can help with other than that correction on South Dakota?
Committee, any questions for Mr. Griffith? So it'd be interesting to me how Utah uses those earmarks, the $50 million, how that is disseminated to the school districts. Because, if we wanted to do something out of the box, like taxing gambling and using that to pay for food for the kids. So is that something, Mr. Griffith, you could look into for our next meeting, and how we could disseminate that, and what structure works for us?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. And I can do that probably by Monday and have it to all of you, but we'll make sure to present it at the next meeting. We'll have some details about that program.
Okay,
So, great, thank
all
you.
right. Dr. Pikus?
Thank you.
Dr. Brown?
Oh, I think there was 2 copies of it. Sorry, apologize for the technical difficulty. Dr. Amanda Brown will go from APA to make it a little easier on our teleprompter friend. So the question was coming up yesterday, kind of what is being purchased in food service expenditures? How much of that is a staff versus food? So what you can see here is for FY24 expenditures by object, and an object is like salaries, benefits, purchase services, which are contracts, supplies and materials, which includes your food costs, and then a couple smaller items. But you can see of that about 58 million, 18 million is in salaries for staff. Almost 11 million is in the benefits. So the question that was coming up yesterday of how much can the benefits help close the gap, it closes at least half of what we were seeing. And that trend, just going to the next slide, so you can see again that salaries are about 1/3, benefits 20%, and supplies and materials, including food, are about half. And that pattern stayed pretty consistent over time. If you look at it, the split of how much is on each of those items. And you can see they've grown, of course, over time, but the relationship between them has stayed the same. So that benefits amount has been somewhere between 8 to the 11 million we're seeing over that period of time. So that's a little answer to that question. Any additional questions I can help answer?
Committee? questions for Dr. Brown?
Go
So
back
it's
to
about a 50-50 split, it looks like. So
And
as
then
we
it's
go
for-
to lunch today and pay $4.75, Mr. Chemical Engineer, half of that is for. See how quick he is, educated in Wyoming. All right. Any other questions? Dr. Pikus, any other input that you'd like to share?
Mr. Co-Chair, not on this particular issue. I'm prepared to move forward
Okay.
on technology as the next step.
All right, we will wrap up nutrition. Thank you for your late evening, Dr. Brown and Mr. Griffith, for your efforts, and we'll move on to technology at this point.
You want to see if I can get this up there now, right? Yeah. You want me to get rid of, oh, first we got to do escape from, well, but now escape. And now, but there's mine, right? Oops. Yeah, custom. I don't want to get, okay, there we go. Okay. And now are we sharing?
We'll now go to the share button.
Gotta get the Zoom first. There we go. Now we go to share. And then we find this one right now, this one here. Look at that. There we go. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Co-Chairs, members of the committee, I guess I have to talk more today than yesterday, so I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but we'll find out as the day goes on. At the last meeting, there was a substantial conversation about screen time, about the number of computers, and what makes the most sense, or how you wanted to go forward, and asked for more. You asked for more information, and so I've prepared some more information around how our model works, what's in it, and what sort of the parameters are. Before we start, I want to start with a little bit of a spoiler alert. This is a quote from a 1983 article in a highly respected education journal that basically says, whether you deliver instruction in person or by some other media, what matters is the quality of the instruction, not the way it's delivered. And Richard Clark, just to be completely upfront, he's a colleague of mine. He was a professor at USC when I got there. He retired a number of years ago, but I still talk to him fairly often. And this gets quoted a lot. So I think one of the things that you'll see driving this is what matters is making sure that students have good teachers, and whether they're using a computer because they deem that to be the best tool, or in-person instruction, or most likely a combination of the two, that's how students really will succeed and learn. So that's kind of overarching and driving my thinking as we go through this. I want to talk about the current funding model a little bit. Talk some about screen time, because I know that was particularly a concern of yours, Co-Chair Heiner. So I want to be sure we talk about that and the different kinds of things. There was also some questions about the textbook market and the digital versus print. So we did some research to understand what that looks like. A little bit about AI, because it's hard to give you a lot, because there were 4 more articles this morning when I woke up that weren't there yesterday. So it's I'll do the best I can. And then sort of my initial thoughts of rather than recommendations, perhaps I should maybe call it things you might want to think about, or we might want to ask us to get you more information on. Now, one thing I did is another colleague on our team, Annabelle Eportola, and I spent some time last week and over the weekend trying to build a simulation model to estimate more accurately the costs of technology under various scenarios. And the real idea was to enable, our model gives you the choice of one computer for 3 students, or we said one computer for each student. But that might want to vary by grade. The kind of computer you have might want to be varied. So it hasn't been fully vetted with Mr. Wilmarth yet. So I just want to make it clear that he may have ways to improve it yet, because he's very good at this. But I think we at least we can start answering some of those questions and actually tie the total cost to the school districts, because we then applied it to ADM by grade as well. So we have something that's a little easier to use, and we're able to get there. We learned a lot about our cost estimates from the past as well. So I may on occasion suggest we didn't have it exactly right before. So we'll go forward from there. So the current model provides $250 per ADM, which funds one computer for 3 students and provides additional resources for networks and printers, copiers, operating systems, and learning management systems. And in fact, those 3 components, that is the non-computer components of it, are about $235 per ADM. And then the reason that it's not very much more expensive for computers is the current model assumes one computer for 3 students and a replacement cycle of 3 years. So, but if you do that, the cost is probably a little more than $250 per ADM. The EB model estimated $450 per ADM, and depending on what your assumptions are on the cost of computers and by grade level, we, making relatively expensive assumptions, came up to about $450. So that number feels pretty good. And again, using the 1 to 3 years. And it says 1.3 computers. It's actually 1.36 computers per student. And the reason for that is that's our tool to allow this district to have enough money to purchase computers for teachers, computers for office staff, and computers for other people in the school. So all the other devices that are in schools, particularly related to instruction, would fit into that percentage. And the simulation actually assumes that 0.36 is applied per ADM, regardless of how many students there are per computer in the base computer. So we think we have enough flexibility to simulate pretty much whatever option we think makes the most sense in Wyoming. We have we've looked at other states, and basically, in addition to all of that, the central office model provides now $50 per ADM for central networking and security and safety and a number of things like that. So that's kind of where the current model is. And maybe I should just stop and make sure there aren't any questions before I dive into the next step.
Seeing none.
Okay, thank you. So at the last meeting, Co-Chair Heiner was good enough to have Dr. Hovarth come and speak to the committee for about an hour. And he's in the scheme of how people feel about the use of computers in schools, he's the most anti-screen time of the people who are writing in the academic literature. I did find his recent book, and I read it. It's an interesting book. He makes, in his words, a strong case, not 100% convincing, but a strong case. And the last third of the book, which limits its academic value to me, is it gives parents strategies for how to get districts to not have computers in front of their children. So he's becoming a political organizer, if you will, as well. But that can be helpful to parents who have concerns about screen time. And as you're probably aware, there's a growing feeling in communities and in school districts and among school boards that their students are spending too much time on screens. I guess the one caveat I'd put in front of this as we start is that the school districts can only control screen time in class and in schools, and what happens at home is a problem that school districts have less control over. So anyway, a little bit of commentary on Hovarth's work. I had not heard of him prior to the day we met, so I spent some time looking him up and checking with colleagues. And one of my colleagues had read his work and he agreed with me. He's got some interesting points. He makes some sense. Clearly, it's a view that we ought to be thinking about and respecting as we look at it. But he's on the far end of the continuum of whether or not we should have computers. And as an academic and an economist who really often wants to waffle on everything, even though I try not to when I work with you, Hovarth's writing is about as aggressive as any academic we generally read. And my colleague who said this is the person who I previously thought was the most aggressive in that sort of writing. So when he thought so, I thought, okay, I'm feeling good. Anyway, some of the concerns that came up to me as I read his report, just to try to balance it as I would any report that we read when we bring research findings to you, was he has a lot of research studies that he reports on and reads, but as you go and dig through the references, there's a great range from fugitive literature, from things that don't appear to be peer reviewed to peer reviewed literature. And so I worry a little bit that there's over reliance on work that isn't necessarily been peer reviewed by colleagues and thought through or reviewed as carefully as it might. So that's a concern. The biggest thing is he makes a point over and over again that screen time has actually reduced student performance. And that's not how I read, or what I think I read it differently. What he said was the effect size of in-person instruction is higher than the effect size of online or screen time instruction. Therefore, if you use, but there's a positive effect side for online instruction too. He said, but because the effect size is smaller, screens have a negative effect on learning. That's in my mind and the places I've been reading, I think it's a methodological argument that one can have. Several of you teach methodology courses in your own universities and probably think about these things too. But if you are gaining something, but not as much as the other, is that having a negative effect, or is it just having a smaller positive effect? And how you want to read that, how you want to interpret that. We got at lunch at that school, we can all have a good conversation about what the best way to think about that is. But there's a whole lot of other variables that I would think about around that, like who's teaching which way and how we control for teaching quality, and it's just a wide range of things to think about. So,
Dr. Pikus?
Yes, sir.
We have a question online. Representative Bear has his hand up.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Dr. Pikus. I appreciate what you're saying, but I just want to add a caveat and have you address it. We have a limited time with these students. And so we're talking about time here. So we have to make a choice between that instructional time from a person and screen time. So I think it's pretty clear that if we choose to preference screen time and in-person time has a higher effect, a better effect, then we have chosen, if we choose a less effect, that's a negative outcome. Would you agree?
Representative Bear, thank you for that question. Respectfully, I'm not sure I would agree. That's the methodological problem that's here, because what I don't think's been controlled for are the quality of the instructor or the characteristics of the instructor. And I know, Representative Lewis, if I may use an example in a positive way for a moment. Kelly, excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm having a day today. I know who you are. See, too much screen time. Representative Kelly, I'll get it right. I promise. You teach online. I know. Now, in my personal experience has been that I feel like I'm a much better instructor in person. And I think it's because I haven't taught much online. You have the experience. So a student who has a class from me might be very much better off in an in-person class. It might be the opposite for Representative Kelly. And so it's matching teaching methods. It gets back to it's good teaching, not the method for delivery. And in both our cases, I mean, I can have people use screens in a classroom. It's harder for you to have in-person instruction if they're spread all over the country on computers. So I think it's not all that clearly determined, and it's a lot harder. And my next point, of course, is I think that the limits Hovarth suggests are really fairly unrealistic, because when your students graduate, they're going to be expected to be able to use technology and use screens. I can't remember the last time someone who came to fix something in my house didn't type everything into an iPad. I can't remember the last time somebody I was asking a question for to get an estimate of a cost for something didn't type it into an iPad or a computer. So I don't think you can say we can't have them. I sent you all at one point, shortly after we met last time, a draft of the LA Unified School District's screen time policy. Not to suggest that LA Unified is what Wyoming should follow per se, but I think that the concepts around teaching children are similar in Wyoming and in Los Angeles. And,
So
and,
we
and
have-
I'll get to their model in just a minute and show the differences and how they exist. So
Doctor, we have a follow-up question.
oh, I'm sorry, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the follow-up opportunity. And Dr. Pikus, respectfully, your point about the variation between one instructor and another, that is accounted for in the data when we look encompassing all of the teaching that is in person versus all of the teaching that is done with screen time. And I think Hovarth's work shows that as far as being able to train a young person on how to use the computer, for instance, for testing, because most of our testing is now online, is a simple 20-minute effort. And so therefore, that is not excluded simply by giving preference to in-person instruction time. So I think all of those things are addressed in Mr. Hovarth's work. But I think the data shows that there is a preference, or should be a preference, for in-person training versus screen time. And I don't think this committee or the effort that we've been discussing would ever eliminate entirely screen time. We're just really discussing, in particular, K through 3, whether K through 3 should be focused on screen time versus in person. When we're trying to get kids up to a certain level of reading, we know that the impact of not being able to read by third grade, what that has on prison rates and our society in general. So I think we're trying to push back on the idea that K through 3 should have the same emphasis on screen time as 4 through 12. So with that in mind, I think the data is pretty clear, and it's not just Hovarth's data that proves this out. So just wanted to make that comment that the data is important, and it can be clear that we need to preference in-person time to screen time.
So just for the public's information, Dr. Hovarth was not able to be here today, so he provided written testimony, and that is included in the meeting materials, his written testimony for this committee. So that's the testimony that we're commenting on right now. It's written by Dr. Horvath. Dr. Pikus?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and thank you, Representative Bear. I actually think you and I are very much on the same page, and as long as we're doing spoiler alerts, I think at the end of the day, what I'm going to say is the question is, how do you integrate screens into education and at what pace? And what I will tell you is I don't have the answer to that. I'm watching very closely what the LA Unified School District does. Despite it being Los Angeles, they actually have a lot of really smart people who work in the school district and do a lot of really good research. And they're within the context of trying to work out their new superintendent, they are, thinking about this. So that gives us one base point to look at. And I think I have a slide in a minute or two that shows you what the initial recommendations appear to be. And it essentially amounts to moving from 0 screen time in early grades to more screen time during the day. But I think it's at a maximum of 180 minutes, which is about half of a school day. So I think that I don't know what just happened there. Actually, did everybody lose the screen? Oh, okay. I'll just keep going, and we'll see if we can't get it back here. Or do I need to do something? Okay, I'll leave it to you. See, disadvantages of screens everywhere, right? But I think that it's important. Hopefully, Representative Baker still here. That we use both in terms of instruction, and I think that but using it, having a computer and using a computer are two different things. And so if you're going to fund it, what are the sort of ideas and how are you going to do it? And at what point do you need to move from having multiple computers that can move around so a class can use computers, but then the cart goes to another classroom versus every child has one that they can pull out and then they can take home and use for their homework. Where those things go, my upbringing is with Talmudic scholars, but it works kind of with teachers on this issue too. If you bring 10 Talmudic scholars into a room and ask them a question, you'll get 11 opinions. It's the same on this. So, I hesitate to give you a firm, definitive answer. I don't want to promise that when we come back, I have a firm, definitive answer. I may have a better answer. And that's why I spent time last week adjusting our building a simulation so that we could actually help you understand the cost implications of decisions you make as well, so you can factor those in. So that's sort of the point at which we're at. So the proposed LAUSD policy is no screen device in preschool through grade 1. And then 20 minutes a day for grades 2 and 3, 30 minutes a day, and it goes up, as you can see on the slide, which is now showing again, to a high of 90 to 180 minutes a day in grades 9 through 12. And I think you can assume roughly a 6-hour school day when students are in attendance in classrooms. So I don't think anybody's thinking you should be on screens all the time. And one of the things I talked about in part of our recommendation for one-to-one computing was, one, schools have that generally in Wyoming and in most states. And in a state where you do sometimes have off days because of weather conditions, an occasional day of a full day on screen and interacting with teachers is probably better than not having any contact. So that's another consideration that you'd want to make. LA has a lot of other restrictions, including whether any kind of devices can be used at lunch periods and passing periods, at least through the middle school years. They block a number of YouTube programs and other things that, unless teachers use them for instruction, and they suggest more paper and pencil assignments are encouraged. And I think, as I read Dr. Hovarth's work, the part that convinced me the most was the importance of both doing paper and pencil things and including, he said, taking notes by writing. And just to prove I'm like that, I'm sitting here taking notes, okay? And it's not just because they were stealing my computer while they were talking. It helps me too. So I think that his work is valuable and important. And part of the problem is we're in a difficult time where we don't really know what the effects of these are as well as we might. And the research is very mixed. And I think you need to be, I don't want to criticize Hovarth's work. I want to suggest that we need to be careful about some studies are have done far better than others, and it's relatively new. So again, it's sort of the concept of having a screen doesn't mean you have to use it, but buying a whole lot of screens that nobody uses is equally silly. So I don't know what the exact mix is, and we can talk about that, but again, I think I can get you a lot of different opinions on that. And then the other part that's important, and I think I have the next slide might be the YTOP study, the YTOP assessment.
Yes,
is
we have a question, Dr. Pikus. Senator Ruffus?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we go on the LA study, they had these cut times that we see at the top for specific grade levels. I assume they kind of just made that up. Is that accurate? There's no data science, there's no analysis, there's nothing underlying that. A group picked those numbers based on their gut instincts. Is that accurate?
Senator Rossfus, Mr. Co-Chairs, I don't think they just made it up. My sense is that this is their preliminary assessment of what the literature says. And so I would assume I don't know the people who do the research and who did this directly, but I'm familiar with how their offices, their work. And what I assume is they did a pretty deep dive literature review, and their conclusions are a little different than Jason Hovarth's about when screen time makes sense or doesn't make sense. And they're, I don't recall seeing in Hovarth's book sort of a graded thing that's as detailed as what's in this policy. And you sort of need the detailed gradations here if you're going to try to decide how you're going to fund computers. So is theirs exactly the right one? No. Is the policy finalized yet? The intent is to have it available July 1st, so there could be some changes between now and then. The board has been a little distracted. You may or may not know their superintendent took a leave of absence 4 months ago because of an investigation, and he resigned earlier this week, I guess it was, and yesterday they appointed the interim as the full-time superintendent. Board's been distracted, so they may not hit this policy on July 1, which is just next week. I don't know how the inner workings of the board work. But I think it's based on what they
Yeah.
think is the best research that's available right now, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, I don't mean they totally made it up like randomly, but as far as the data that you're talking about, my question is really about that. Do they have a report that includes citations and a literature review based on the best available research that is available as a companion to whatever they released as a policy, or not? Is that something that we could see?
Senator, at some point, yes. Whether it's available publicly today at that level of detail, I don't think it is. But as soon as I can find it, I will certainly get it. And I'll be happy to, in addition to reading it through, I'll be happy to share it with you immediately if you'd like.
Yes.
So I think that they have that. It's like any sort of academic process, right? We've done the research. We've got the researches. They haven't published it for us yet because the district hasn't got a policy. And I'm a graduate of LA Unified School District, and I've worked with the district for 40 years as a professor. And before that, when I was in a graduate school, it's a very insulated system that's very hard to get things out of. So I would be pretty sure that the report here will find its way out to us substantially after the policy discussion is finalized in the school district. But at some point, it ought to be something we can get.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
quick follow-up. So yeah, and if you have those contacts, give them a call,
Yeah.
ask them and try and get that. My concern gets to the fact that it is a political entity that's making the decisions. And I've seen from time to time that sometimes political entities make decisions without necessarily having an underlying heavily researched report behind it. So that's what I want to understand is how much is political decision versus how much is research based. And it sounds like you're the one to make that phone call. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, I will make that phone call. And the answer to that last question you just asked is, I don't know. But I will find out.
Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Co-Chair. So I'm in a learning curve here. Maybe you can help me. So a second grader spending 20 to 30 minutes on the computer, what are they doing during those 30 minutes?
I'm not sure I can answer that question, Senator Salazar. I would imagine that it would be somewhat determined by the teaching methods of the individual teacher. So that a teacher in one second grade class may do things differently than a teacher in another second grade class. But what it appears here is they should not have students spending more than 20 minutes a day on they could just be familiarizing them with the screen, the machine, although they probably come to second grade pretty familiar with how to use them since they have them at home. It's all yours. Dr. Brown's got an answer.
I have an anecdotal answer as a parent of a fourth grader of kind of what it looked like in the early grades. So it tended to be both to the point, some familiarity, some typing type skills, and also, at least in her program, some interactive literacy or math kind of almost game oriented things that kind of broke down lessons to suit where she was in her learning. So based on assessments, what skills she needed to be working on. So they'd have little units of during that period of time where every student's doing something slightly different in math or literacy. So again, one parent perspective, but
All right.
So I think, thank you, Ms. Co-Chair. I think when we had that expert,
Holbath. Yeah, Dr.
Dr.
Holbath.
Holbeck, I think if I'm not wrong, someone correct me. His whole point was they're on the computer to learn how to use the computer, or are they on the computer to learn those things in the basket of goods, math, reading, and so I guess I'm just trying to, again, I go to the second grader. I'm trying to understand all that. So.
And I would just say from my perspective, it is related to the basket of goods because there's a literacy and a math component. And to Dr. Pikas's point, they're savvy enough, they know how to use devices generally already, but that like typing is a skill to learn over time.
And if I could follow up,
Any other questions?
Mr. Co-Chair, I wanted to follow up
Yes,
on
yes.
Dr. Brown's. I'm sorry. I think it's a continuum. It's like anything. You have to learn how to use what the capability of the machine is and how to use it, and then begin to use it to learn. And as we'll talk about in a few more minutes, one of the challenges that comes up with artificial intelligence is it enables you to learn perhaps less deeply. So learning that the machine has its disadvantages too. But you do a Google search, you get AI, so it's there.
So Dr. Pikus, just before we leave this slide.
Sure.
This policy that they're instigating July 1st, apparently they've had some policy preceding this change. What drove the change? And what was the previous policy or the existing policy, and what drove the change to this policy limiting the time like that?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I'm not sure I can give you 100% perfect answer to that question. My knowledge comes from reading the Los Angeles newspapers and having a little bit of contact with people I know who are involved in the system one way or another. But there is Dr. Hovarth is one of the leading edges of a movement in the United States, perhaps around the world, arguing that children have too much screen time and it needs to be reduced. And he's one of the people who's focused on less screen time, where learning is what's really the focus of what we're supposed to be doing. There are groups, you probably have some groups here in Wyoming as well, that have been pushing school boards very hard to reduce the amount of school time or the amount of screen time that are going on, that's happening in schools. I don't know of any specific examples. Our colleagues behind me probably do. And so this was a response to a feeling that there's too much screen time and a very strong, powerful lobby group. I don't know even how representative they are, the thinking of parents generally. I'm not aware of substantial sorts of polling or concerns. I would think they would be relatively have a relatively strong effect with parents, because I think there's a lot of concern outside of school with screen time. I mean, children have cell phones at younger and younger ages. They have other sorts of technology. They're using those at home as well. And so it's sort of something that's all sort of boiled up, and they're looking for it. And then this policy is not, I want to emphasize again, this policy, as I've listed it, is what was introduced to the school district 4 or 5 weeks ago as a draft for conversation and discussion with the school board. The goal is a July 1st finalization of the policy. As elected officials, you know, the world always doesn't work the way you plan it to when you set it up. So I'll let you know. And what I will do, if you like, is as I learn more about it, particularly if it's finalized, I'll see that staff has all the information I have right away so they can share it with you.
Okay.
Because this is a field that's moving exceptionally fast. So all right. So one of the things I was concerned about is as I understand it, the state standardized test is done on computers, and it starts at 3rd grade. And so if that's the case, you want students to have familiarity with the computer when they take the test and comfort. So that's not an added stress point in terms of student outcomes. But that starts at 3rd grade. So again, how much time do you need prior to that? If you have no screen time through 2nd grade, that might be a little challenging. That may be what drives no screen time in K and 1, but it has it in 2nd and 3rd grade in LA's policy. But again, I don't have a copy of the policy in enough detail to tell you that's what's going on. So the question to me is, what grade should computers be integrated so they're comfortable with online tests? And then how do you further integrate them over time? And what's the right number? Is that a policy you want to make at this level? And do you want to err on the side of being restrictive in computers, or err on the side of them being available, and assume that the instructors and the teachers will know best when to use them, and that they may use them at different levels, like Representative Kelly and I might do, if I get his name right? I apologize again. I'm dead now, right? So that's where what I think where I'm sort of driving to and thinking about how we can provide you with information you need to make some decisions about how much to put in the model. And Mr. Co-Chair, as you can see, you're asking the questions I already had answers to just a little further in my slides. So hopefully I've figured out most of them. But there's growing resistance to the number of one-to-one computers in lower grades. I think there's still value, particularly when schools aren't open. They see these screens all the time at home. They're on Instagram, they're on all these other things. If they bring home a school computer and they do use it for schoolwork, some of the time, is that a valuable thing that helps with performance? There also are, one of the challenges with particularly like newspaper stories is they're full of anecdotal data. Some parent is very upset because their child comes home with the Chromebook, opens up an app and starts playing games that they don't want them to play. Okay. How often or how frequently that happens in an N of 1 is difficult to know. And how and at what level do you control those things within the computing environment is a very difficult, challenging question. And by high school, there's a pretty good chance that some of those kids will be able to break whatever you put in the system to allegedly protect them. They'll find a way around it. They're pretty good at that. And if they're able to do that, is that a major concern that you have in what's happening, or is there some way to take advantage of that to help them get jobs as coders and get really good high-paid jobs working for companies that do this? I'm not sure what the answer is there either. So yeah, I see that. I was going to stop, but thank you.
We have a question over here. I'm sorry, I'm in la land here. Representative Kelly.
Riveting conversation, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Okay, so I've been sitting here having a lot of big thoughts about this very big topic, this meta-analysis that we may disagree on the methodology. I don't think it's really, we should get into an issue here of, are screens good or bad? Are they detrimental or helpful? It's very clear that it depends how we define screen time. It depends on the quality of the adeptness of the instructor using the tool. It can depend on the student. But one thing the science is clear about: handwriting fires up parts of the brain that using a computer does not. Handwriting and literacy are linked. Countries are seeing this all over the world. And that's why there's this resistance to one-to-one computers in lower grades, because the evidence is clear. Literacy has gotten worse as kids get away from actually forming and recognizing letters versus just seeing them on a keyboard. But the question for the funding committee isn't whether or not we're going to dictate to the districts what their curriculum is or what the professional educators will do what's best for their students. That's not our job. Here's my concern. If the funding model puts in money for one-to-one computers, are we creating an incentive for districts to stay away from pens and paper if we're pushing all this money for technology at that point? Is it creating an incentive that could be counter to what we'd actually like to accomplish?
Representative Kelly, that was in about 12 seconds what I've been thinking I was trying to say all along, that we need to have some sense of leaving it in the hands of school districts. And I want to go back to my spoiler for just a second. The answer is some instructors, some models of instruction at different grades, screens may be a better way to do it, and other times writing and doing it may be. And I agree with you very much with the early grades, paper and pencil writing and doing it, and the connection to literacy is strong. I think I mentioned that. I think that's the strongest part of Hovard's work, is he does a very good job of explaining that. So I think that the challenge is, and I think this is what you said, how do we provide enough screens and then entrust the people who are educating the children to use them, I'm not sure if the right word is judiciously, well. I had this thought at some point, the concern with screens is, and we'll get to the cell phone issue in a minute, but I wanted to keep with my back to the room and just have everybody be honest, and everybody who's looking at their cell phone at something other than what we're talking about, raise their hand. And I'm sure there's obviously a bunch of faces just turned red. Okay. I don't think they'll raise their hands, but we know they're doing it. Okay. So if we're doing it, they're doing it in school, they're doing it in class. And even if they have a computer because we're cell phones in a box somewhere because we've taken those away. They won't all be being attentive. Whether that's worse than the daydreaming that some of us did when we were in school or better, I don't know. I mean, I think the problem is it gets down to these very individual different learning styles and challenges and how we provide enough one technology in whatever form that is, including these things, and how we help teachers give them the tools they need through professional development and through their learning to be able to manage classrooms so that the amount of daydreaming, the amount of falling asleep, the amount of playing with apps on a Chromebook is minimized, but it'll never go away. All the people back there, they all know that now, right?
Follow-up, Representative?
Right. And of course, there's the advantage. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's much more convenient to chew on a pen than a laptop too. I understand that. But just back to the initial question, have you seen any evidence or could you conceive when a state is pushing heavy funding for technology, that is an incentive for districts to use more technology, even to the detriment of students sometimes?
Representative Kelly, I'm sure that exists. I can't say I've actually seen it directly. I'm not at liberty to share it with you yet. I have a colleague at USC who I talked to at length about this. He's writing a book. It's I can't remember the exact title, but it's something other. It's about education, and if I were to paraphrase the title, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Okay, and it talks about all of the things we've done in education to try to make things better, and whether they've worked or not. And he's written the technology chapter. He shared it with me. It's very good. And his sort of 3 points is, yeah, it seemed like a great idea, and we jumped in with both feet, and we need to back off on that, and we need to figure out what the right level is, and we don't know what that is yet. And he's got an extensive bibliography that is, I don't want to make value judgments, but it certainly is at a minimum as good as Hovarth's, okay? I mean, he's a very, very competent faculty member. His name's Morgan Polikoff, for those of you who poke around in the literature or want to go look for it. I'm happy to connect you with his work. So that's where we are right now. Is it seems like a really good idea, and how much of it is and how much of it isn't. Yeah, at the end of the day, for the students you teach, I have to trust your judgment on that within the context of the way you've chosen to provide instruction or your university's chosen to provide instruction. And we've moved far more to online learning. One, it extends our reach dramatically. Anybody in the room can join our EDD and Ed Leadership program and take it online. But even for our students in Los Angeles, who used to be able to get to campus in half an hour, and it now takes an hour and 30 minutes, that saves them so much time. It probably improves their learning in other ways. So, there's all that's, I think the problem with all of these is it's all the other environmental factors that we really can't control. So,
Dr. Horvath, there's a growing momentum to reduce computers for elementary classes. We've got the Surgeon General that just issued a recommendation that we limit screen time for elementary students. The Federation of Teachers, the president, has agreed with that. Sweden has removed all computers from classrooms. So we're seeing this growing movement to limit screen time for elementary classes. And yet it seems to me like you're trying to justify that we continue with one-to-one for all students. So why the disparity between all this growing movement and you're trying to justify keeping it the way it is?
Mr. Co-Chair, I think you called me Dr. Hovarth. So
I'm sorry.
So now we're even, right?
I apologize.
I wouldn't have called you on it if I had made my own mistake. It's all good.
Pipus.
It's all good. And of course, if I were Dr. Hovarth, my answer would probably be different than to whatever I'm going to try to say right now. You ask a really important question. And I don't, what I want to give you is a research-based answer that I don't have. Mike, by the way, has just come up with some stuff on LAUSD's policy with a link that gives us a little more detail, including a PowerPoint from their presentation. So we can learn some more from that in a little bit or at lunch. Part of the issue here is unless I miss my mark, when we've asked in the school districts, they already have one-to-one computers. And that happened with COVID, and everybody went home and everybody bought Chromebooks, and they've continued to do that. So they're there. So taking them away may not be a particularly wise instructional decision either. And so my colleague Alan and I disagree on this. He'd still put you back at 1 to 3 all the way through 12th grade. And I'm not sure that works either. So I'm just being completely honest here, if that's okay. Probably better that way. There isn't necessarily a justification that says there should be computers available for every kid. And in fact, there's no reason you can't have a policy that does it 1 to 3 through a certain level of grade levels, and that those computers are organized in many cases with a few in a classroom so students can do group work as they get older, and have carts so that when there's an instructional, something you want to teach or something you want to do that really does require a computer, that it's available. And then there's just a scheduling issue so that teachers can share them and do them. And there's to me, having the flexibility to do it when you want is important. Whether that needs to be funded at a 1-to-1 level or not is probably a question that's, we could probably pull folks back there and get, a whole lot of different answers as to what makes the most sense to them as well, or perhaps to you all. So again, my lack of having a strong answer for you led to my trying to build this simulation so that we can at least also understand the cost implications of different choices what you make. But it also gives us the ability to really say, really, what should they be? But I don't think there's a research base out there, whether you look at Morgan Polikoff's work, or Dr. Hovarth's work, or the work of LA Unified, that is going to get it right, and it's going to be the one policy that's going to get all children to learn. I just don't think that exists. It may never exist. So that's our challenge.
Senator Schuler, you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So yeah, I think you make some good points. I keep thinking back, we have a little bit of an issue because we have, a lawsuit hanging over our heads, which requires that we do something with our technology. I think I think the idea of having limits is really kind of unique, and I kind of like that idea, as long as there's obviously some local control. But I've always kind of disagreed with the fact that we check out Chromebooks to every Tom, Dick, and Harry when they're just little kids, and teachers and districts get kind of worried about the number of those that get trashed and have to be recycled and new ones ordered and whatnot. It seems to me that we could come up with something that would be more like a limit at a certain level. Let districts kind of decide how to do that. I think the idea of having computer labs makes more sense, because then you can limit it. The district can limit it, to the teacher, like second grade teacher can only use the lab in her room or his room so many minutes a day. That makes more sense to me than just checking out, these Chromebooks every, kid and saying, have at it. Because as we know, they do have a lot of the same information and the same access to these technology things at home. So is that something that you would kind of look more favorably on, in terms of letting districts, come up with some limits, but also make it not so much every kid has one-on-one, but we have access with every kid having an ability to have one, when they go into the room, if the teacher requires it for a lesson? I don't know. Am I beating around the bush, or do you get the hang of what I'm trying to say here?
Did you have? I had a couple of thoughts in response, but I'll go ahead. We'll both answer. Senator Schuler, I had two thoughts as you said that. One that I hadn't considered well, but the basket includes computer skills. Now we don't know how you or eventually a judge might interpret when that means they have to have computer skills, but that still doesn't mean they have to have everybody has to have a computer. That's the question. And then I had this thought, and I'm Mr. Co-Chair Heiner, I'm pretty sure you told me you were in your previous career, in your continuing career, you're an engineer. So I'm going to guess if I were to visit you somewhere in your house, I'd find a pretty big toolbox with all kinds of tools, because you're good at fixing things. But the hammer might stay there for weeks on end before you need to use it. But when you want it, you want to have it, right? So computer, if you think of it as a tool and not as something different than whatever we've done, this tool just cost a whole lot less than this tool did, especially this one. But it's
Dr.
it's that's
Pikus,
the hard.
I only have one hammer, and I don't have a hammer for every every room and
Of course.
every person.
But if a member of your family lived with you and you worked together on projects, you'd have 2 hammers, one for each of you, if you were working all the time on it. I mean, and hammer's a $5 to $10 thing, or maybe a little more, but it's very different than a computer, and I understand that as well. But I think that what I've very much, and I have this argument with the head of the data processing or the computer program at my school too. I keep trying to tell her they're not precious things. They're tools. And when something goes wrong with them, you just replace them. You just do them. It's
we
not
have a
obsolete.
question
You'll
from
do what you want it to
co-chair
do.
here.
So that's the thing. I think Dr. Brown's got something.
So Dr. Pikus, I guess I think we've kind of beaten this. Let me ask you a question on the one-to-one. What, you have not come up yet with a final recommendation to this committee with regard to what the state should provide the schools in the different grades, particularly the lower grades, what we should provide. Is that correct? Are you still looking at the data, and we'll come back later with a final recommendation to this committee on the one-to-one aspect of education and the funding of that?
Senator Salazar, I'm sorry. There's a piece of me that wants to punt on this at the moment, which probably isn't an answer you want to hear, but that's what I may do in that. Our recommendation to you last year was 1-to-1. That was my recommendation. That was based on the person we brought in to help us think about this. But when I really pushed on him, when we talked about it, it's the hammer example, for lack of a better term. Okay. What the right number is very, to me, it's just, I don't know that there's one size fits all and across 48 districts or 348 schools. I'm just not sure that there is a simple answer to that. And manufacturing an exact answer is probably impossible. And in my mind, particularly at the lower grade levels where Chromebooks are extremely inexpensive, I mean, you're spending $20,000 a child, and we're talking about spending $100 a year for a Chromebook that lasts 3 years. So it's not clear to me that what, you know, why you shouldn't just have them available so that you can use them when the time comes. That's the thing what my logic is.
So
just
follow up, Mr. Coach. So that helps me a lot.
Mhm.
This committee has proven, I think, that we're willing to provide the funds for what we believe in and what needs to be done in K through 12 education. So we prove that through salaries and other aspects. So the bottom line is, following your recommendation from last year, on all grade levels, you're recommending 1-to-1. That's what I'm getting, right?
Senator, Mr. Co-Chair, if you pushed me and said, what is your recommendation,
Right.
Larry Pikus, I'd say I'd stick with 1-to-1 for now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. That is what my recommendation would be. But unfortunately, I'm not sure I can provide you with the kind of research base that I've been arguing we should use for all the decisions we make and everything we do here. Okay, I'm in one of those horrible binds, and I'm just thinking my best bet is to be honest with you, and I know we'll have public testimony on this in a little while, and I'm eager to hear what the folks in the schools have to say as well. I think that'll be informative. You kept wanting to say something. I kept interrupting it. I know she's got something smarter than I was saying.
No, I just wanted to circle back a bit to, it could be because I'm the numbers person. I'm less concerned about the use of the device versus the access to it. When we're having that conversation of, is it checking out 1-to-1 students or is it on a cart? For me, if it's the same cost, if you're still having one and it's held in the classroom, that's the same dollar amount. So it comes back to, if we want limited use in early grades, is it that you still want those educators to have access to that device? So you might only use it for 20 minutes, but if that classroom needs to have a set that they have access to whenever versus a shared device, the cost isn't different. So that's what I keep circling back to, is more of an access issue versus setting how much time it's being used for is, do you need the dollars to have the device available when you need it? So
So we have a question
so I think
online.
that's the question I come back to, is it
So-
fair devices or not?
Oh, thank you, Dr. Brown. We'll go to President Beitman, and then we'll come over here to Senator Ruffus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Pikus, listening this morning, we kind of beat this horse to death over, what does the data say, what it doesn't say on technology. We haven't touched on what my question is how much of an influence has the, I don't know what you call them, like education tech companies had on the ramp up of pushing these computers in the classroom, especially at such an early age. Clearly it's profit driven for them. You've got your education tech companies like Power School, and they push this on the districts adopt this technology, and then they're encouraged to give every kid a computer and so on and so forth. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the profit incentives here behind these big corporate interests, and how much does money and that profit incentive play a role in this push to one-to-one computing? Thank you.
Senator Beitman, thank you for that question. I had actually thought you were going to ask the question you've asked at other meetings regarding textbooks versus computers. And my next slide, when we get to it, starts to address that question. But to answer your first question, I'm not sure I can address the issue of profit motives, other than if you go into business, that's always part of your decision. I'm beginning to see more literature that talks about the considerations around, education companies have the ability to hire people and build programs that are very attractive to students and far outpace what teachers can develop on their own. And there's some concern about how good the instruction is through those, how healthy they are for children, and a whole lot of numbers. One of the concerns that came up in the Los Angeles policy was they have a whatever you call it, an interactive thing on the computer to learn, and many students were deeply frustrated because it was so slow. I mean, they quoted kids who said, I could learn that in 10 minutes. It took 2 hours. And other kids who were confused in the 2 hours and didn't know what they learned. I'm not sure that's different than sitting in my class. I don't want to pick on other teachers, so I just pick on myself. I teach school finance, so how clear I am, you all have a good sense of that. But it's a hard problem because they're, K-12 public, PK through 12 public schools this year will spend across the United States $1 trillion. So it's a massive market for these things. And of course, there's lots of room for all kinds of those problems that, like every other kind of problem we've had, are difficult to solve. Whatever the thing we're purchasing is and we're going for. So Senator Beitman, I wish I had a better answer for you, but I really don't. But clearly there are companies, just like with testing, just like with textbooks, just like if for many years I was a member of the Association for School Business Officials, which is many of the people behind me probably are members of the Wyoming chapter of that, maybe the national one. And at their annual conference, there was this massive, exhibit hall full of all the things school districts buy: school buses, bleachers, chairs, tables. Just an immense amount of money gets spent on all of these things. And so that problem, I mean, it's easier to tell if you got a good table or not than a good computer program, I imagine. And then the other problem is just the concern that's just been on the front of my mind all week is, LA superintendent got caught up in buying a technology product that was supposed to provide all kinds of great things for schools. And the FBI is investigating him, and it's not clear why. There's been no other motion to it, but it all's around this company that provides this one service. Now, it's a contract for $6.2 million in a district that has a $12 billion budget. So, it's not clear why the FBI is investigating either, I think. But those are all those kinds of problems come up, and there's examples of that in all of those issues everywhere we turn. I don't know if computing is different or not. I think some people are starting to ask that question and try to do some research on it, but I don't think we have anything yet.
Senator Beitman, do you have a follow-up?
I don't know if I can get an answer, to be honest with you. I just think we're policymakers. We're trying to make the best policy we can given the information that we're given. And this one's a tough one because the information is murky at best. We don't know, what to do here on whether it's 1-to-1, 1-to-3 current model. We're trying to get this right. I like Senator Schuler's comment about a computer lab. I think that makes sense. It covers the technology portion without, overspending if we are overspending on technology. But, there's just so many unknowns here, and I just don't feel like we're getting any information. I think we're just spinning our wheels here. That's where I'm at. I'm frustrated.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. We need to move on. But we have a question from Senator Roppus. Oh, okay. Let's move on, Dr. Pikus.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. So one of the questions that came up in our last meeting was textbooks versus digital, and the growing. We thought of textbooks not being available in hard copy as readily as they once were, and certainly not as easy to update. So both my tech person Scott Price and I spent some time trying to understand the textbook market a little better. And there's sort of three approaches. There's hard copy print, there's digital only, and mixed models depending on grade level or subject. Again, more hard copy in early grades, more online in later grades, and then more, I'm having a moment where I can't remember the right word, but interactive program, instructional programs where they ask you a question, and depending on how you answer it, it tries to find a way to give you an answer. And I'm pretty sure computers don't do that well as people do yet. Although I think that Senator Beckman's last comment as he started, he says, well, I'm just not, I don't know, where to go, and I'm frustrated. I share your pain, sir. So I appreciate that. So what we're finding is in elementary literacy and math, there's a trend towards toward blended print and digital. For supplemental intervention programs, they're much more shifting to digital models, again, because they can provide more immediate interaction. In science and career and technical education and elective, it's very mixed. And technology has the advantage that you really can update things as you learn about systems that change over time or get improved. You can see those improvements right away. And then in assessment, adaptive learning has mostly become, that's the word I was looking for, adaptive learning is mostly digital. Then we looked at major U.S. K-12 publishers. And 9 of the majors have both print and digital. 9 are digital with limited or minimal print, and then 1 is digital only. So that's the question we put to ChatGPT in various ways was major publishers. Okay, and I think one of you asked me last time what you could do to influence textbook publishing. And I think I told you then to move to California, Florida, or North Carolina, or Texas. That still holds. They have textbook adoption states, and they have substantially larger textbook markets than Wyoming has for obvious reasons. So that's where we were in an answer to your question. But it feels like there's a growing trend to put more reliance on digital delivery. But I think the backlash that we've started to see on the policies on this, and as Representative Kelly said, the importance of not always relying on digital technologies, it will keep some hard copy in the film. So that's. Okay, so we looked a little bit at the cost. They're pretty much the same. I mean, the primary difference is you have a 6-year textbook replacement cycle. You buy a book in one subject 1 year, and every 6 years you start over. And then the books wear out or become obsolete, and it depends on the subject matter. The digital, there typically is a licensing fee. And over 6 years, it comes to about the same amount of money as it costs you to buy that book to last 6 years, but it's updated consistently, so that if there's a major change, which is probably more important on some subjects than in things like elementary arithmetic, they they're already there. You turn on your computer, it downloads an update, and you have it. And school district tech staffs know how to make that happen or what goes on with that. So that's my answer to that question that you brought up. I don't know if there's any other questions. I guess just I think in most states you are only able to select from what others choose to put in front of you, and it does get back to Senator Beitman's question about profit motives and what are they sending to you, and is that what you want? The publishers, yeah. Cell phone bans has been a huge thing. It's part of devices. It's, I don't know how controversial it is or not. The general people, we should have them. This is kind of a thought. As of May of 2026, 35 states have laws or policies that ban or limit cell phone use in classrooms or schools. 26 states have mandated full statewide bans or strong restrictions. Wyoming at this time does not ban cell phones in schools. Each district sets its own rules. So from what I can tell, most districts restrict cell phone use during class, and the specifics vary across the 48 districts. And you had proposed legislation in 2005 that would have required every district to adopt a policy prohibiting or restricting student use of cell phones, with exceptions for children with IEPs or 504 plans and documented medical needs that meant that they had to have access to a cell phone, which is a different kind of a situation. But what's been the impact of the bans is really the question. There was one study came out of Stanford that it's sort of the one study that really meets kind of the academic standards that you want to try to understand, that you'd really want to trust to say whether they work or not. And of course, because it's an academic study, it's not going to just say yes or no, but it pretty much comes to say that the bans work. What they found was in the first year, disciplinary incidents increase and student subjective well-being falls. For the same reason that we all have that problem. Everybody back there, maybe some of you, I don't know, I can't see it, you keep checking your cell phone, right? Did I get a message? Did I get a text? Did it buzz them? I think kids get nervous when they can't look at it and check it and see what's coming or whatever. So that was something that they found. That the effect on well-being became positive in later years, and disciplinary concerns faded when they learned that they could leave it in that box outside the classroom and the world would go on and they could get it when they came back from class. It's sort of how I interpreted that. That kind of makes sense, right? They got used to the new reality and it worked. To me, the really important question here is what's the impact on academic achievement? And it seemed to find that the average effect on test scores have consistently been close to zero. Now, remember, this is only sort of over the last 3 years when these have started to become important things. High schools see modest positive effects, particularly in math. Middle schools saw small negative effects on cell phone bans. There seems to be little impact on school attendance. There's little impact on self-reported classroom attention and little observed change in perceived online bullying. So what it sort of says is not much changed, but it's new. And like anything, it takes time to adjust to the new rules. That is, if I take your cell phone away today, you're really mad at me. In a month, during the summer, when you go out and played baseball with your friends and went hiking in the mountains, you're not as mad at me, right? Same idea, I think, here. As they get used to the policy, they're able to focus more on school, and there's no way to know, but hopefully long-term, that will lead to more positive effects on student learning. So my sort of reading of the literature is there's nothing that says you should get rid of cell phone bans. They essentially do nothing or work. And so and it's probably a much better way if you're trying to teach, well, in Wyoming, 15 or 25 children, to not have them all doing this all the time at random times and keeping folks, you have a better chance of them more of them paying attention more of the time, is I guess the way I would say it. So that's what I found on that. So my general conclusion is I think.
Question from Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just in general, whether or not Wyoming were to enact a cell phone ban, what effect would that have on our funding model?
Probably none, unless there's some cost of having the packages that they put them in or the places to secure them when they're not in class. But those would be relatively small classes. Costs. I don't think there'd be much. I'm looking at my colleagues. I don't think that's a particularly an issue, but I was interpreting the conversation from before as screen time, and that was a big part of it. But thank you for that, an important addition to the conversation. I appreciate it very much. So among my conclusions, I think Clark's statement remains true. This is about how you teach, not about what the tool is that's doing it. And that's, well, let me finish my conclusion. So the first step is to decide the appropriate curriculum for a school or district's children. What is it that we in whatever city or town or school district in Wyoming think is the best for the children who live in our community? The second step is to identify the best delivery method based on selected curriculum, the availability of materials, and identified student needs. Okay, what do we need? From second or third grade forward, I'm still kind of in a place where one-to-one computers make the most sense. Below second or third grade, they're less necessary, and I think I'd leave it to the individual school districts to make their choices. And that school bands appear to be modestly helpful to date. So at the end of the day, you know, I think that it's really based on the decisions of how you're going to offer learning. And that's going to vary by grade level. It's going to vary by subject. And I mean, in a perfect world, it's going to vary by child. But you have 15 children in a class in elementary level, 25, give or take a little, in a high school or a middle secondary school. And so you don't get to just make individualized decisions every minute of the day. But which is going to work best and how to deliver it is I think it becomes a school challenge. And you're never going to get every student paying attention every minute of the day. And my final example is we charge probably $3,000 to take one of a class I teach to a student. We have very high tuition, and we have essentially agreements or formal rules about our online class that says you need to be online with your camera on all the time during class without a pet in your lap or other distracting things, and you know, a series of things like that. And you know, we still lose students during the course of the online thing, just like we do, you know, just like when I'm in front of class and they're all doing their work email in the back of the room. I tried to sit in the back of the room once when I had a co-instructor to see how many were doing that. And the second time I went to sit back there, when came in to do it again, they were all in the back row already. So we know what's going on. So you can only control some of that. You know, and it's, I guess it falls out in the grades you give and how you read their papers and such. But so that's kind of my sense of it. But I guess my final, I said one-to-one earlier, I'd back away from that below third grade and see where it goes. And we can, so this is one place where I'm sort of like looking at you and saying, if you've got sort of senses about it that are as limitedly database as mine, they're at least as good as ideas I have. And I'm happy to answer any more
Okay.
questions.
Any questions, committee? Any questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to go into public testimony after a brief break. And hopefully we can get some testimony about what the school districts feel about computer and technology and screen time. Because they're closest to the parents, hearing what the parents are saying, and we'd like to have that input. So we'll reconvene at 20 to 10 to continue with public testimony. Okay. Ashley, are we ready? All right, I apologize for the tardiness of our long break. The restrooms were very busy, I guess. So we're going to move into the public testimony, and we have already 3 seats up here, but we want to hear from everyone as much as possible. We have a number of people online as well. And so we'll hear these 3 that are on the stand, the hot seats right now, and then we're going to go remotely, and we have 4 online that we're going to hear from, and then we'll come back and resume hearing public testimony in the room. So I don't know which of you have decided goes first.
Mr. Chairman, I can go first.
All right, thank you.
Charlie Kaufman, Washington County School District #1 Chief Operations Officer. I want to talk a couple pieces today, one as a parent and as an administrator for our district. As a parent, some of the narratives are not quite accurate in what I'm seeing. So with my kids, I'll give an example of my first grade son. Me and him got into a little tussle the other day. He brought home this big old packet of papers, yay big. And so there is several evidences that they're writing and reading and writing and doing those pieces in first grade. He's not on a Chromebook very much. There is no Chromebook checked out to him. So the only exposure that he really has is when they do the state mandated pieces for Lexia, which is to weed out reading difficulties or anything like that. So I can talk to that experience as a parent. As my kids have gotten older, I have a 4th grader who is getting more and more into the Chromebooks, but she still didn't have one checked out to her. And so she does do those things. She does on there, but very limited. And so as a school district, we do strive to keep that screen time down. Our screen time during the last 6 weeks of the school year, which is during YTOP and FastBridge and Lexia testing, at K1 was 45 minutes, 30 of that being the Lexia diagnosing any reading difficulties. 2nd through 3rd grade was 55 minutes. 4th and 5th grade, 96 minutes. Middle school, 77 minutes. Our high school was 94 minutes. And then our White Hawk Alternative School was 87 minutes on the average. So I think we are, as a district, trying very hard to reduce that. We are blending a lot of things. And there are certain classes that require more technology pieces. Like a CAD class is simply going to require more screen time. And so that piece is, with those pieces like that, as a district, trying to make sure that we have the best teachers in front of them. After all, teachers and teaching make a difference. And that is one of our core beliefs as a district. Just a couple other thoughts on the technology piece, on the one-to-one and where we're at. We currently get about $286,000 for the ADM that we have. We just replaced switches this year at $220,000. Actually, they're being installed as we speak. Those are things that are not being addressed. We have switches, we have servers, fiber loops. I mean, we just put in a fiber loop last year to replace some old fiber, $50,000. These are things that are not being taken in consideration as we do these. And so, yes, while I understand that you may look at that as, well, you have 1,100 kids, one-to-one, that's 1,100 Chromebooks, that's fine. We generally do about a 7-year rotation of 100 Chromebooks a year. 6 through 12 are checked out to the student. And so that is something that as we go forward, those are some of the sunken costs that aren't spoken about and are very expensive, not to mention software costs and other pieces for insurance and liability purposes. There's a question about why one-to-one. Having multiple students on a single Chromebook can be a security nightmare. My tech director has pointed out that the more kids on a device, the more opt that you can have some other problems. So if a kid breaks a Chromebook, then you're trying to figure out who broke the Chromebook. Pretty soon it becomes more of a management nightmare rather than having them checked out to individual students. Our expectation as a district is that we give them their first one in 6th grade and they expected to go with them until they're seniors. And so that is the expectation from our district that they do that. And so that is something we do try to manage. It is a very difficult job to manage those pieces, but that's something that we try to do. I'm going to go ahead and, last piece on cell phones. So currently in Washakie 1, cell phones are banned in the middle school, like we do not allow them at all. And then in our high school, that they're banned in the classrooms. They can only have them in passing periods and at lunch. So I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kaufman. Question for Senator McCune.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So they're basically issued this Chromebook in 6th grade that's supposed to last through 12th. What happens when it gets broken, who replaces that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator McEwen. So what happens is if they break it, generally depending on how it's broken, there are instances when a kid is malicious and we do make them pay for that. We had a kid run a Chromebook through the bandsaw. So yeah, that was pretty malicious. But in the instances of like accidental breakages, like something falls or it just gets broken or something goes haywire, we generally replace the first one, or we actually have them pay a technology fee to be able to help offset some of those costs. But yeah, generally speaking, it depends on the motive and depends on what they do to it, but we try to be as flexible as we can on a case-by-case basis.
Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Co-Chair. What would really be helpful, and your testimony has been helpful for anyone else coming up, I know this committee would very much be interested in those grades 2 through 6 with regard to the use of screens. That we would really appreciate your testimony on that, because I think we're seeing some evidence anecdotally that screen time in those very low grades are not developing is not as good as we used to think it was. So
Mr. Chairman, Senator Salazar, that's great points across the board. I would agree with you that at that age, we try very hard to keep them out of that. I know that there's some people that think that's a little old school to have them do so many writing assignments, but as with my son, that evidence is happening there. We try very hard to make sure that happens, and I can only speak to that, my district, and to that, but that is something that we strive as a district to make sure we do limit that, and that's something that we're very cognizant of.
Mr. Kaufman, you issue one-to-one Chromebooks at grade 6 and above. In the lower grades, you mentioned that they utilize Chromebooks occasionally. Is that on a cart or how is that handled?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, if I may. Yes, so it is either on a cart or in a lab. So we have a variation on both. They're able to go to technology 3 times a week, 30 minutes during that time period. Generally, if it's on a cart, then they'll bring them to the classroom and do the special there for the 30 minutes, the 3 times a week.
And Mr. Kaufman, in high school where you need higher computing power for AutoCAD and some of these programs a Chromebook cannot do, what do you do in those situations?
So yes, Mr. Chairman, yes, we actually have labs for those. We have different labs for the computing capacities that are needed. So in the case for like your journalism classes, we do have Apple and a Mac lab, and then we do have a standard PC lab for those other classes that require that kind of computing.
And just to follow up to that, are they able to take any of those laptops home other than the Chromebook?
Not normally. We don't. We try very hard as a district to make sure that that's all completed within, and they are given opportunities to complete that within our schedule during remediation times.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Kaufman?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Yin, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Kaufman. So I hearing your note about having a fiber loop installed, do you feel that the technology infrastructure is not accurately captured within our major maintenance budget? So I guess, are you using your per device costs or per device component of the funding model to fund technology infrastructure instead of just devices?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yin, we use a couple different funding sources. We try to make sure we use our major maintenance where we can and where it's appropriate. We try to use the computer costs within the model where it's appropriate. And sometimes we do have to use some depreciation reserves for that. And that's something that our board has set aside to do that with. So it's sometimes a mixture of 3 funds to get that done. But to be very frank, yeah, it's not reflected in the model, those infrastructure costs, and sometimes they're not eligible necessarily for major maintenance replacement.
Okay, seeing no further questions, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Mr. Co-Chair, my name is Jeff Jones. I'm the superintendent at Sheridan School District number 1, serving Tongue River and Bighorn communities. The kind of the background in our kindergarten through 2nd grade classrooms, our teachers share carts of iPads. In our grades 3 through 5, our teachers share carts of Chromebooks. And then in grades 6 through 12, we have one-to-one Chromebooks for students. I've condensed my comments here. I believe we're unintentionally combining two separate policy questions into one. The first question is whether every Wyoming student in grades 6 through 12, in my opinion, should have access to a computer when instruction calls for one. The second question is whether students should spend too much time in front of a screen. Those are not the same questions. As an educator for more than 3 decades, I agree that students should not spend the entire school day looking at a screen. Some of the most important learning in our schools happens away from technology. Reading printed books, writing by hand, conducting science experiments, building projects, participating in discussions, creating artwork, performing music, and collaborating face-to-face with classmates. Those experiences remain an essential part of a well-rounded education. But limiting time on the screen is a matter of good instructional practice, not a matter of limiting access to instructional tools. The research actually supports this distinction. A landmark peer-reviewed meta-analysis led by Dr. Binbin Zheng, published in the Review of Educational Research, examined nearly 100 studies of one-to-one computing initiatives. Dr. Zheng and her colleagues found that when every student had access to a device as part of quality instruction, students demonstrated statistically significant improvements in English, writing, mathematics, and science. Just as importantly, the researchers concluded that the benefits were not tied simply to the presence of technology, but rather to how teachers thoughtfully integrated it into instruction. In other words, effective teaching, not the device itself, produced better learning. Perhaps the simplest way to think about this is with books. We don't improve reading by funding one book for every 3 students. We improve reading by making sure every student has access to a book and then trusting the teachers to know when to use it. Computers should be viewed the same way. A computer is not the lesson. It is simply one of the tools a great teacher chooses when it best supports learning. Funding determines access. Teachers determine instruction. In closing, as policymakers, you play an essential role in ensuring Wyoming schools have the resources students need to succeed. Local educators have the responsibility to determine when technology is the right instructional tool and when it is not. That is what professional judgment looks like. In today's world, digital literacy is no longer an option. Students conduct research, write papers, complete state assessments, collaborate with classmates, access digital learning, explore career pathways, prepare for college, military service, apprenticeships, and the modern workforce. Every Wyoming student in grades 6 through 12, in my opinion, deserves reliable access to the tools needed to develop these skills when instruction calls for it. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Superintendent Jones. Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the Zhang article here, the meta-analysis, the peer-reviewed one. It is, it's 10 years old, and it goes back to looking at studies back to 2001. And this is the question I have. How might the results be affected today by this constant access to artificial intelligence that they did not have 10 years ago?
Mr. Co-Chair, Mr. Representative Kelly, I'm not sure I understand the specific question. If you could repeat that.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the question is, we have this study that concluded one-to-one access essentially is good for the students. Do you have anything more recent in the last 10 years since the rise of AI that still would confirm that, concerning that I've got a serious concern now about students not just using a tool, but actually using a mental wheelchair, as this constant access on a screen to AI might be really cutting in at their cognitive development.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Representative Kelly, I understand what you're saying. I think the point that I was making from this research still holds true, whether it's 10 years old or not, and that the heart of the improvement in learning was the instruction. not the way the technology was utilized. So the teacher, again, as we've said many times, the instructional practice beyond the access, the instructional practices without the technology being the driver was what determined the significance in the learning improvements.
Any other questions for Superintendent Jones? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chairs Salazar and Heiner. Kristen Mayo from Teton County. As I listen to this discussion, you guys have so many great questions that we're getting asked from parents that we're trying to answer in the district. And the short answer to what does responsible use of AI look like? What does screen time look like that's responsible in a school district? And unfortunately, there is not a whole lot of historical data or best practice established in the US. And to get to the reason that we're having this conversation, what does funding of technology in schools look like? We have to have some of these answers. Unfortunately, we won't have them before you have to make this decision. And as I consider what would be best for our district, you know, I did share with you all through email some information that we're sending out to our community. And we've established a committee to focus on screen time and responsible use of technology and AI in our district. How do we teach students to best use technology? We've also made some changes already in our district. Our middle school next year will no longer be taking home devices. We've considered banning certain apps that are useful in teaching, but we're seeing that the educational use of those apps may not be having the consequences or the unintended consequences that we desire. We're getting some pushback from parents on some of those things. And so this is an evolving chapter. And pre-COVID, in our elementary schools, we had device ratios that were 3-to-1. We were 2-to-1 in our middle school, and we were 1-to-1 in our high school. We plan to stay 1-to-1 in middle school with no take-home devices, and then have a 1-to-1 in our high school with they can take those devices home because they're going to need those devices. We use MacBooks and iPads in the middle school, iPads in the elementary school, MacBooks in the high school. And again, the cost of the devices is ever evolving. Apple just came out with a new device to compete with Chromebooks that's driving down the cost of some of those devices for schools, which leads to Senator Beitman's point of there's a lot of money in school technology. So how do we make these decisions that are the best for our students? So some of the things that we're studying over the next year in our district are personal devices and social media. Whether we offer take-home devices in our district or students have their own, we still need to be teaching responsible use of personal devices. That's very clear to us when it comes to bullying and some of the other things we're seeing in schools. Is that a burden that the school district should be carrying? I don't know, but we are. And we want to make sure that the students have the tools to be able to use technology appropriately. Instructional technology, what does that look like? And that leads to some of the topics in the consultant's presentation when it comes to textbooks versus screens and the availability of textbooks. Yes, the availability of textbooks is less today than it was 10 years ago. Does that mean that that's a static thing that's going to change? No. Those went away when technology was pushed into schools. I'm not saying we should go back to textbooks, but a teacher's use of a device is very different than a student's use of device. Just because we don't have one-to-one devices in elementary school for students, that doesn't mean we have to go directly back to textbooks. The teachers will still have devices. They will still have access to those digital resources. And so studying those pieces, what do we need to effectively teach our students? You know, if the information isn't out there, that's what we're trying to do in our district, is figure out what we need to best educate our students. I think everyone in this room wants to have the most positive outcomes without making general assumptions about what we need. And then what does entertainment and passive use look like? You know, we all know we can all get sucked into doom scrolling on a device. Educating our students about what healthy use looks like. That's important. That's an important piece of what we are now teaching in our schools, not just on the devices we're providing, but also with their personal devices. There's a lot more to what we're working on in our district that you should each have in your email, but unfortunately, the answers aren't going to be available by the time you need to make your decision and propose this. But, you know, COVID forced us to go to a one-to-one device. We were organically moving technology into our schools across the US until COVID hit. And then all of a sudden, every student needed a device to take home and do work from. It's reasonable to think that now we need to reevaluate that process. You know, maybe have an emergency protocol in place, but as we saw with COVID, tons of money was flushed into schools to compensate and provide devices for every student. I can imagine if we had another pandemic or emergency like that, the same thing would happen. So what is a reasonable amount of funding for devices in schools? I think backing off the one-to-one to K-5 is reasonable. I do believe one-to-one in the middle school is important, although we won't be sending devices home with students, and then one-to-one in high school is essential.
Thank you, Superintendent Mayo. I appreciate
I'm a
that.
business manager, sorry.
Oh, well, are you a doctor?
Well, as I discussed with Dr. Smith, he is now allowed to call me El Presidente because I just have to be a little elevated there.
Appreciate the testimony. It's very enlightening what you are doing up in Teton County. And you mentioned the one-to-one, no take home for middle school, high school one-to-one. They are able to take the devices home. But in elementary school, you didn't mention how you provide access for the elementary kids. How do you do that?
Well, currently we have one-to-one devices in elementary. They don't take them home. They sit in carts in the classrooms. The use of those devices is very minimal. And so when we buy technology for schools, we're on a 3 to 4 year recycle or refresh cycle. And right now we're in the middle of that cycle. And we want to do this analysis and study this before our next refresh cycle so that we can invest in the appropriate amount of devices for K-5. We will likely back off the one-to-one in our next refresh cycle. We don't know if that will be a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1. The state testing piece is a piece that we're concerned about. But there's other ways to solve that issue. Right now, the state testing window is a finite window. Is there ways that we can explore to expand that window so that in the testing cycle, we can move devices from one elementary school to another to make sure that everybody can do the testing at the same time? There's opportunities that we can facilitate. That's a little harder in a smaller school district where they only have one elementary school if they're 2-to-1. We have 10 schools in our district, 7 of those are elementary schools. So we have the ability to shift resources around in those testing windows. Some districts may not have that flexibility. So there's intricacies to all of this. But believe me when I say we're dealing with the same amount of frustrations that you all have brought up on this committee.
All right, thank you. We have Senator Brennan, and then we'll come over here to Representative Kelly. Senator Brennan.
Thank you very much. First, I just want to say thank you for those who have testified on this. And I'm hearing that a lot of districts are really asking some great, thoughtful questions on this. And so I appreciate this because I think we're all struggling with this idea of screens and screen time and technology versus pen and paper and books together. And, you know, as a parent, I also know that that's a challenge, just whether it's an education classroom or at home. And so I appreciate all the thoughtful questions on this. One of the things that comes up when we talk about every district or every student having a one-to-one is like sending them home. I know COVID was an important time where students had that. They weren't in the classrooms. And then when we did go back to the classrooms, if you got COVID in the house, everybody was stuck at home for like a week or two while everybody got better. And so that was important. now that we're out of that, I do hear things like sending them home, virtual learning on during like snow days, or Cheyenne had a wind day this last year. That was crazy. And so as people come up and testify, I would be curious as to how many districts are doing virtual learning instead of just having a maybe a traditional snow day that would have been in my generation where it snowed and you went home and drank hot chocolate and built snowmen or whatever. So that would be my question.
Ms. Mayo?
Happy to answer that. We do not have a virtual option necessarily in our school district. If we have a student that has a long-term illness that can't come to school, we will provide what's necessary for them to continue their education, whether virtually through packets, through books or textbooks. There's always a way to adapt to those unique situations. As a whole, it's not something that we offer currently in our district. If the need arises, we'll adapt.
Okay, all right, thank you. Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, which apps were banned? Because as long as there might be some issues, it might be good to share that information.
We haven't banned it yet. The one that we're getting a lot of pushback on right now is YouTube. And the parents that we've heard from, we have a lot of parents in our middle school that do not get their students a phone or a device or a personal device until they move on to high school. Or they're very restrictive with their devices, but then they find their students in their room doing homework on YouTube for hours on end. And so we're exploring ways to ban YouTube on, or restrict, I should say, not ban, restrict YouTube on student devices across the board. We have a lot of educational resources that sit in YouTube. So we're trying to figure out how the teachers can still access YouTube, still use those resources in the classroom without having them available on student devices, because that tends to be one of the areas that students go into that doom scrolling behavior. And that feeds into we're not allowing middle school devices to go home unless there's an exception.
Okay. And also because parents are a crucial source of feedback. Have you gotten any feedback from parents requesting more tech and screen time for their kids?
No, we haven't. When we started down this path this spring, we hadn't really been measuring how much screen time, especially that K-5 group, was getting. And we kept asking from our teachers, like, how much are you using the devices? And they're saying, we're not using them. We're not using them. And really what it came down to, on average, we were probably in that 20 to 30 minute window per day. It wasn't a lot. And so from the fiscal side, that leads us to, well, then do we really need to have one-to-one devices in our elementary schools? Are we spending money on something we don't need? But then there's pushback, like, we need the devices when we need them. We want them available. So it's a tug of war. It's the same tug of war you all are seeing. And what it comes down to is, how do we be fiscally responsible, provide the resources that are necessary for education? The YouTube is, that's a hard one, because there are so many educational resources at the same time. It provides a lot of distraction for students.
All right, any further questions for Ms. Mayo? Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate that. We're going to go online now, Ashley, and capture some of these people that are in the waiting room.
Sure thing, Mr. Chairman. And I apologize, I did misspeak when we spoke this morning. That group is of 5. So I'm going to bring them all into the room, and then they'll go one at a time, if that's okay.
Hello there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, please proceed. Introduce yourself and please proceed.
Great, thank you. My name is Teddy Friedman, and I'm a Wyoming parent, and I really appreciate this conversation and this opportunity to speak, so thank you. I recognize that educational Educational technology can be a valuable investment when it is used intentionally, is developmentally appropriate, and improves student learning. The concern is not with technology itself, but whether current use reflects the outcomes the investments were intended to achieve. The Wyoming Digital Learning Plan from 2023 to 2028 envisions technology as a tool to strengthen learning. Yet many families in Wyoming, myself included, observe that technology has increasingly become the default for instruction, classroom management, and student downtime, rather than a targeted instructional support. Given the significant public investment in educational technology, it is reasonable to ask whether these two tools are being used as intended and whether they are delivering measurable educational value for students, teachers, and taxpayers. Parents of Wyoming elementary students have shared the following testimonies. One parent of a kindergarten student was disappointed to witness that library class relied on computer-played audiobooks rather than reading aloud, missing an important opportunity for human interaction and engagement with stories. Another parent of a second grade student observed that while the teacher was occupied with classroom cleanup, students were permitted to use individual laptops to watch YouTube for entertainment, a time that could have been spent for meaningful peer-to-peer interaction and play. One parent shared that their third grade child responded to a school internet outage by saying, "I hope the internet is out again today at school. We got some time to play games with each other." A parent of a lower elementary student expressed concern about screen time during assessment periods. While teachers conduct required one-on-one interview-style assessments, many students spend extended periods on laptops while waiting for their turn. This reflects a broader systemic challenge. Teachers managing large classrooms often rely on screens as a practical tool, even when those moments could otherwise support hands-on learning and social interaction. My friend and a fellow Wyoming parent, who is also on Zoom with me today, plans to provide comment and share more on how parents of older students are seeing similar challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Friedman. Appreciate you being online. Any questions? Not seeing any. Let's move on to the next one.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak as well today. I'm a Wyoming parent. Recently, a middle school parent shared concerns about increased reliance on digital math platforms.
Ma'am, could you introduce yourself, please?
Taylor
For the record.
Stemke.
All right, thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. As handwritten problem solving becomes less common, students may become skilled at navigating software and selecting answers without fully developing mathematical reasoning, critical thinking, and mastery of concepts. Most importantly, students themselves are noticing these challenges. One 8th grade student in Wyoming explained, "While I understand that providing each student with a Chromebook can provide efficiency, reduce paper waste, and make assignments easier to complete, I have noticed some challenges as well. During lessons, I have observed classmates playing online games and visiting websites that are not related to schoolwork. This can be distracting to other students and often resulting in less participation, with responses from only 1 or 2 students and less engagement during class discussions." These stories are not criticisms of Wyoming teachers. Teachers work incredibly hard within the systems and the expectations that are currently in place. Instead, they raise an important question about the return on Wyoming's investment in educational technology. Are current technology systems delivering the instructional benefits they were designed to provide, or have they unintentionally shifted classroom time away from the focused attention, human interaction, problem solving, creativity, and active engagement that supports student learning? As Wyoming continues to invest in educational technology, we believe the goal should be to ensure those investments, enhancing teaching and learning, deliver measurable educational value, and complement, not replace, the essential elements of effective instruction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stemke. Appreciate the testimony from a parent. Any questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you for your participation. Your mic is not working, sir.
Am I next?
Yeah, Molly, go
Molly.
ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's under my husband's name. My name is Molly Schultz, and I am also a Wyoming parent in Albany County. I'm also a professional counselor in Laramie. And I just wanted to give kind of two pieces to this. Some of my own experience as a parent to 4 kids. I have kids that range now from 12 to 19. And so I have a college age, a daughter, and then down to a middle school son. And we have been in this district since they were all born. So I've kind of watched the progression of what has occurred pre-COVID, post-COVID, kind of the development of technology over time in the academic environment. And so I feel like I've got this experience as a parent, and then just thinking about kind of what recommendations we're looking at giving. And so I'm going to share some recommendations first, and then I just want to share a couple of my more of my concerns as I've watched technology progress in the academic environment. So I definitely have concerns about technology use in our schools, and I am recommending an evidence-based approach to educational technology. To protect instructional time and maximize the return on Wyoming's investment in education, I'm recommending that the state should require Wyoming school districts to implement bell-to-bell cell phone-free policies, establish consistent expectations for screen time limits, and monitor computer use across districts. The goal for this is to protect instructional time, improve student focus, and ensure public investments in teaching and learning are not diminished by unnecessary digital distractions, which I have seen in each one of my kids and their peers. I definitely understand that educational technology is a significant public investment. To maximize its value, Wyoming should ensure technology is used where it clearly improves learning, not simply because it is available. Research does not support the assumption that more screen time leads to better educational outcomes. To strengthen the return on this investment, the state should establish age-appropriate classroom technology guidelines, limit non-instructional screen use, ensure technology supplements that not replace teacher-led instruction, and require clear instructional benefit for technology use. The goal is to maximize the educational return on technology investments through purpose evidence-based use. And so that's part of what I wanted to share. And then just wanted to share a little bit about some of the concerns I've seen just as a parent with my own kids. One of my major concerns is once kids get into middle school and high school, they have more free time in the classroom. And what I have observed with my kids is that classroom management, teachers are using cell phones and screens as a tool for classroom management. And that feels, so sad to me as I've watched my kids and heard stories. And then just cell phone policy in middle school and high school is something that, feels like it's a little bit of an uphill battle and something that really needs to be addressed statewide. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schultz. Appreciate that. Cell phone policy is probably not within the purview of this committee because we're dealing with the funding model, but it's something we do have the chair of our education committee here sitting by the side of me, and the other and we have both chairs actually from the Senate and the House sitting here on this committee, and that's something that I know they already have had a lot of discussions about. So your testimony is very appropriate. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Very good, thank you. Hello, my name is Dr. Joe Schroer, and I wear many hats. I've taught in pre-K through 16 ed for over 20 years. My job, I teach at the University of Wyoming in the College of Education. I teach human learning and development and assessment. I sit on a local charter school board, and I also substitute teach in the local schools. I've been doing that for several years here in Laramie, and I teach both in person and online courses for the university. I just wanted to reiterate a few points about the research of the use of technology to improve learning in schools. As the earlier speaker said, technology by itself does not improve the learning outcomes. My spoiler alert would be we need to invest as much or less in technology as we invest in teacher preparation. It is about the teaching strategy and how the content is structured. It should be used as a tool. And that tool has been fairly ubiquitous in many classrooms that I've been in. The second thing I wanted to mention is that there is a myth about attention spans declining. And I believe Hobarth has noted that in his research, but the actual research shows that adult attention span has increased over time, and the average child attention span has remained relatively stable. Attention span decreases or increases based upon the engagement of the activities in the classroom. If it's lengthy readings and lectures and learning is very passive, of course, our attention spans seem to wander. Attention spans increase when there's active learning, appropriate cognitive challenge. And so the real issue is boredom. Technology can grab attention, but when it's used just surface level across the board, it continues to add to the crisis of boredom that affect our schools today. And I'd like to talk just briefly about cognitive load and multitasking. When studies do show that when students are on devices, even briefly switching between tasks, notes, messages, apps, email, etc., comes with a learning cost. So simply put, we cannot multitask and learn. The other day I was subbing. So at the end of the school year, I was subbing in the high school. A student was supposedly reviewing for their upcoming final exam, except they had their phone literally on their laptop. They compare with their Apple devices, and it's right there. Students know all the shortcut keys switching between windows very quickly in the middle school that I work in. Cell phones were banned, and I know this is not the topic here, but cell phones were banned 2 years ago in the middle school that I was in. I can tell you it has had such an amazing positive impact on the school environment. The students, however, have learned to text, email, and be distracted via the computer. When students enter the classroom, often students are told, please open your laptops. And it is right then and there that we tend to lose the students, especially their focus. Representative Kelly mentioned the question about the Zhang meta-analysis and the rise of AI. The question that precedes the answer is, who is doing the thinking? When we offload thinking using AI, we're not necessarily processing the information at the different levels of thinking. If we want critical thinking, creative thinking, et cetera, in our schools today, I would say that less computer time would actually be positive. The third and final point that I want to make is that cognitive load does matter. And I know that often technology can either reduce unnecessary cognitive load or increase it. And so students do need to know how to navigate technology, how to use the computers correctly. The keynote speaker mentioned the YTOP is offered as a computer adaptive test in 3rd grade. The benchmark and progress monitoring is done as another the first speaker mentioned in the early environments. Things like FastBridge or Alexi are all on computer as well. So students have to know how to use the computer, but it doesn't mean they need more than the 20 minutes a day. If that. So the last couple things I wanted to mention, just in sum, I just wanted to suggest that Wyoming invest as much in or more in teachers as we invest in educational technology. As we want to prepare students to do the jobs of tomorrow, I would think about funding technology with demonstrated evidence of improving learning, not simply increasing screen time. I like the suggestion of no one-to-one for under 2nd grade. I think we need to invest equally in professional development so teachers know when and when not to use technology. Technology-based interventions in early literacy and mathematics are supported by the research, adaptive practice, and opportunities for repeated learning. The goal should be to fund technologies with demonstrated educational value. And the last thing I'll say, increasing opportunities and training for active learning that do not require screens. Recently, when here in ACSD1, when the internet went down, it was an amazing couple of days. And as you've heard previous testimony, students were interacting enormously with each other, and teachers were forced to get away from Canvas and get away from the computers. And so those were great days, and the school environment was actually fairly productive. So that's all I'll have to say. I appreciate this discussion, and thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Dr. Schwar. Appreciate your testimony. Committee, thank you very much. No questions.
Good morning, Senators and Representatives. My name is Kristen Pritchett, and like my fellow companions, I have 3 elementary age children. So the concerns that have been voiced and that are being brought forth today are from personal narratives and things that we have seen from our children, which is why we're all here this morning. I am a Wyoming parent and understand Wyoming has made substantial investments in educational technology, but measuring device access alone does not demonstrate educational value. To ensure taxpayer dollars are producing meaningful outcomes, we are asking the state to evaluate both the benefits and the unintended consequences of technology use. We would like to propose that districts should be required to track and report time usage by student screen use during instructional time, technology use compared with teacher-led and hands-on instruction, and the effectiveness and cost benefit of digital curriculum programs. Then I would also like to mention it does sound like Washakie, Sheridan counties, and Teton counties are on top of this. So kudos to them. And I know that hopefully other school districts around the state are looking at this, but the impacts are still yet to be seen in ours. Our goal is to ensure technology investments are evaluated by measurable student outcomes and the return on investment, not simply by the number of devices deployed. I believe that Wyoming has an opportunity to lead with a balanced, evidence-based approach to educational technology. The question is not whether students should use technology. I think we all know that they need to and be adept at that. It is whether current technology investments are producing stronger learning outcomes and delivering measurable value for students, educators, and taxpayers. By adopting cell phone-free school policies, establishing age-appropriate technology expectations, and evaluating technology-based educational outcomes, Wyoming can ensure its investments strengthen teaching and learning while keeping student success and well-being at the center of every technology decision. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Pritchett. Appreciate your testimony. And I am grateful for the technology that allows us to have citizens remotely testify in front of our committee. So appreciate your time and your effort and your preparation to be here.
Thank you.
Ashley, do we have any others?
Mr. Chairman, there is one more with this group, and then you have one more online not with this group. So however you want to handle that,
All right.
that's what we have going on over here.
Let's finish up and listen to both of them. Avery?
Yes, hello. My name is Avery Schultz, and thank you so much for allowing me to speak. I wanted to share my personal experience with technology as a student. I went to elementary through high school in Laramie and graduated in 2025, and I'm now attending the University of Wyoming. Starting elementary school, I loved it. We didn't have personal computers up until I was in like 5th or 6th grade. And I loved school. It was a lot more hands-on, a lot more interactive with my teachers, a lot more, hand note-taking, not on the computer. But then when 5th and 6th grade hit, I got a personal Chromebook, and that greatly impacted my education. School became more self-taught. The teacher was less involved with my education. For example, I'm really bad at math, and I have never been good at math. And so when I got the Chromebook, the teacher would tell me to go watch an instructional video or kind of teach myself basically the math. And that became really hard for me. It was a struggle. I liked school less. I also could do as I wanted on my computer. I think I wasted a lot of time in school and out of school because I could take my Chromebook home. And I also think that developed an unhealthy relationship and reliance as a student on technology and screens. I think I began to think less for myself. For example, like with math, it was easy to go look up answers, or now I'm an English major, and it became, in writing papers, my thoughts were less original. I could go, look at, obviously, sources are helpful online, but it became more of that was what was informing my opinion. Um, and so, yeah, I think that really impacted me all the way up into college. But what I really wanted to talk about today was my experience with books online as a student. And that might sound kind of odd. And most people think that, the online library resources we have are super helpful, which I think they are most of the time. And most people would think that contact with things like harmful material or inappropriate material would come through things like YouTube or blocked websites. But in my experience, it came from a school district sanctioned online library. In our school district in Albany County, we use Sora, which is an online library where you can access thousands of books, many of them really helpful, but also some of them extremely harmful in my experience. On Sora, there are sexually explicit books, both in the words they use and the images they show. I was exposed to these books before I was developmentally ready, and that was extremely harmful to me and impacted me all the way up until today. Um, Recently, I logged on to my little brother's account to see if he could see those books, and he could. And that just like breaks my heart. I don't want any kid to experience this, but sadly, I know that a lot of other people have the same experience. And to me, it's highly concerning that this happened on a school computer. For so many. And so I know that technology is a very useful tool in education, and there are important skills we can learn from it. But I think that even with the rules and boundaries that we have in place, it's often more harmful than helpful to the student. So according to my experience as a student with technology and how it impacted me, I would strongly recommend that the policy around technology and computer use change. Thank you so much for your time.
Avery, what program was that you gave you access to those books? Was it Soro?
Sora. It's Sora.
Okay. Thank you very much. We have a question here from Representative Andrew.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. I think a direct and very recent experience with the school system is really helpful for us, and a type of testimony we don't hear that often in the legislature. I'm wondering how you would imagine what would be the best way to structure use of technology for students given that experience, having, in regard to the topic of like giving Chromebooks to everyone versus having them available in a computer lab. What would your thoughts on that be?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that I think being more careful with when we give kids Chromebooks. I know when I was in elementary school and I got a Chromebook, it was around COVID, so it was a little bit newer. There wasn't as many policies, so I could kind of do as I wanted on my Chromebook. So I think we've moved in a good direction with limiting access to different websites or things like that. I think definitely not allowing younger kids to spend a lot of time on computers. But really, I think beginning to move back towards a model of learning with less computer usage and less technology. I think that just limits the ability to be exposed to things like that. And I also think it's more helpful, like cognitively, like I've heard, what the different testimonies talked about. Um, but yeah, I also just think to some degree, when you're younger, there is no point maybe to be taking home those Chromebooks or to be spending all day long on them. Like I had classes where that was all I would do was we would open our Chromebooks and my professor would talk to us at the beginning of class, and then he would go sit at his desk, and I would have, the whole entire class period to finish my assignment and then do whatever I wanted on my computer. And so I just think yeah, limiting the amount of time that kids from all ages, not even just elementary school, but I think even in high school, I think from my experience, I spent way too much time on a computer in my classrooms. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Avery. Any follow-up? No. Any other questions? Thank you, Avery. I appreciate you getting involved. Hopefully you'll stay involved in government, and we look forward to having further testimony. Go Pope.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. You're muted. Oh, there you go. Okay.
Is it my turn?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please introduce yourself and proceed.
Members of the committee, co-chairman, my name is Lindsay Adam. I spoke briefly yesterday. I want to quickly introduce myself more thoroughly. I've been a teacher for 16 years. I've taught in Seattle, South Korea, and Wyoming for the majority of that time. I was the 2021 District Teacher of the Year in Pinedale. I am currently on the Superintendent Emergency Draft Rules for the new literacy law, and I'm on the Basket of Goods Working Group with Representative Andrew. So a lot of experience in teaching. I teach kindergarten through 12th grade English learners. I also have taught Spanish in the past and will be teaching Spanish again next year. I have a lot of experience K-12. I have a lot of experience in every single classroom in every single grade, helping students that don't have a full grasp of English yet. I appreciate what a lot of people have mentioned about the importance of handwriting in developing important reading skills. I want to also point out that even as students are older in the middle school and high school, I think it's incredibly important that they also learn how to read a paper and annotate it. And there's a lot of programs, even though the YTOP assessment system tries to allow students to do that. It comes with built-in highlighting tools and built-in, they can take little notes. They're all very cumbersome. They take a lot of time. A lot of the students I work with aren't just English learners, but they have language impairments. They have working memory issues. They have very intense ADD. And so those are just way too much to ask of them when they're on the computer, just trying to understand the questions. Meanwhile, in class, whenever we read something together as a group and really carefully analyze it, I teach them how to do that on paper. We write notes in the margins, we highlight, we use different color coding for this is a pro for the argument and this is a con. And it has always frustrated me that then they lose all those strategies we've taught them when it's time to assess their reading skills. So that's a frustration I feel, and I still feel that I will teach the paper version because that's better for learning, but it doesn't set students up for success when they have to be assessed online. My district has been one-to-one basically since COVID. One thing I want to point out is not only are we one-to-one since COVID, but there's really been a lot of pressure on teachers for the past 10 years to embrace technology. Our teacher evaluation systems include components on how well we use technology, or not even how much we involve technology. And there was a period, I would say from 2010 to 2017, it felt like every single professional development that we had was on the use of technology, until teachers were also just kind of over it. Because it wasn't really that much about helping students learn better. It was just about using more and more and more technology. I had a very interesting recent experience, though, that I think we need to keep in mind. So I found out I'm teaching Spanish next year at the middle school. We've never offered it before. And I get the opportunity to choose the curriculum. And especially when you're learning language, reading, you're writing, you must be interacting with one another. What I wanted was sort of a physical textbook that would ground our learning, perhaps an accompanying workbook where they could practice what they've learned. Maybe some online games that came with it, but I can make those myself if the publishing company doesn't produce those. What I found was it was extremely hard to find that option. Every company wants to sell you, they'll sell you the physical textbook, but they also want to sell you the digital textbook. And as far as the workbook and the practice, they want to sell you this very robust yearly subscription that costs per student. It includes, some games, some reinforcement activities, a lot of times, since it's Spanish, a lot of cultural stuff. Some of the companies I was looking at, like one of the most popular, they produce great products, Carnegie Learning, but their online subscription, if I just wanted access to this important piece, I had to buy the whole online thing, which was going to have a whole bunch of things that my students weren't going to use as beginning Spanish speakers. And I found it very frustrating. I looked at 7 or 8 different companies. I talked to a lot of different reps. I finally found a company that I have a physical textbook and I have an online workbook. And that's as good as it's going to get. But the best curriculums I've seen, even from those same companies, they're moving a lot more, especially in upper grades of math and language arts, to consumable textbooks. It's almost like a textbook and workbook in one, and it's pricey. You have to buy it every year, but just like an online subscription for a student. And the students get to do what I'm talking about. As they read something in their textbook, they're writing in the margins, and then the questions are right in there in the textbook. So that's where I see the best learning for all types of learners with minimal distraction. If it were up to me, I would recommend for the K2 band, we have like a 3-to-1 computer ratio for students, and that those are housed in a cart. I'm not as a big fan of the computer lab, because I also, as an ELL teacher, I periodically have to test every student in the district. I'm often testing in small groups of 3 to 5. And when we used to have computer labs, that made it very challenging. I didn't need the whole lab for 3 to 5, which then also meant they wouldn't give me the whole lab. And then I had to get real creative on, well, where am I going to test and what computers am I going to use? With the carts, I can just kind of make sure that when I tell the teachers I'm going to be pulling their students for testing, make sure to send them with a computer. There's a little more accountability in, you can put numbers on a cart so that they only certain students use computer number 5. 1 student per classroom uses computer number 5. In 3rd through 5th grade, I would recommend more like a 2-to-1 ratio. I would still say carts. I'm not as involved in the K through 5 space now as I used to be, so I hope I'm not breaking any elementary teachers' hearts here, but I don't see any reason why that wouldn't work. 6-12, I do think students need the 1-to-1 access. I don't think middle school kids need to be taking their computers home. Ours do. We've talked a lot about our 6th graders not even being given their computers yet. When they start school, they have to slowly earn them because they aren't able to differentiate between a tool and a toy. But it's never really gone anywhere, just as far as how we manage that. So I think 6 to 8, they can use their computers at school. I don't see kids doing a lot of homework at home. And if they are, it's what our previous speaker described, where it's quite frustrating because there are some good programs where when you get it wrong, it teaches you and it gives you hints, but a lot of them don't. And so I've seen kids go home and try and do these math drills and they don't get it. And so 120 questions later, they're still at a 40 out of 100 and they're just miserable. But the majority of the students I work with just do not do homework. So they are going home with this computer and then doing whatever they want on it. And I think a lot of parents don't understand when they're at school, there are all sorts of things that are blocked. But when they go home, those blocks don't work and they have access to the world. So that's how I would manage it if it were up to me. And I also think with carts versus computer labs at the elementary school, it eases some of the maintenance for the tech people because you can quickly take a whole cart somewhere and work on it instead of I've had to be in a computer lab once before testing and slowly update manually every single computer. And that took a really, really long time. I'm sure there's things that I wanted to mention that I've forgotten, but with that, I stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Adams. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, Ms. Adams. Ashley, any others online?
Not for this topic, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, let's go back into the room here and carry on.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. My name is Kylie Wall, and I am testifying on behalf of myself. I just recently graduated from high school 26 days ago, so I thought it would be important to have a little bit of testimony from a student who is a fairly new product of the Wyoming public education system. Now, in my personal experience, and I cannot speak for every school and every school district in Wyoming, but I am going to speak for my experiences. I am old enough that before COVID happened, I was in 6th grade when COVID happened. Before that, we had iPads in the classroom instead of laptops, and they stayed in the car. We would rarely use them, but when we did, it was fun. We weren't reliant on them. We didn't use them for work. We used them more for math games or reading games like IXL. And then 6th grade happened, and this was even before COVID happened because it happened at the end of 6th grade. We did get laptops right at the beginning of 6th grade, and we took them home, and it was very different. I've had a laptop and was able to bring it home with me since 6th grade, and since then we've seen the progression of technology and AI. And it seems that teachers have become way more reliant on technology for teaching their students because it is easier for them. I've been told by many teachers that they prefer for students to do their assignments on technology because they don't have to grade papers individually, and it makes it easier for grading, and it's just easier for them, I guess. But in my personal experience in my most recent high school years, specifically this past year, I came up versus something that I, was not expecting. I went into a class the very first day of school with a teacher I had never had before, whom had, as soon as we walked in, said, "Get your laptops out." And he made us get on ChatGPT. I had never used ChatGPT to that day ever. And I was very proud of it because I have always been very against AI. And he made us use ChatGPT. So, and I had other teachers whom we had to use it for assignments, and I had peers and other friends who said, they hold it very to one of their core beliefs that they do not want to use ChatGPT. It's not something that they were interested in. And it was part of the grade. We had to. So we started using ChatGPT, and let me tell you, the amount of dopamine release that ChatGPT gives you, it is instant gratification. It gives you the answer you want just like that. And why are we giving that access to children, yet alone making them use it? And not to mention, freshman year, as soon as you get your laptop, your teachers make you install something called Grammarly. Now, and you go to the settings and you make it accessible in your docs so that when you're typing out an essay, it automatically corrects and tells you what you misspelled, and it gives you about 4 different options to how to restructure your sentences and different words if you want to make it more charismatic or more emotional. And we are losing the ability to be able to think for ourselves. I have witnessed it firsthand because let me tell you, when that teacher made me get on ChatGPT, I was like, wow, this is a whole new thing. This thing is so cool. It has so much information, and it is addicting. It is addicting. It's like you can't think for yourself anymore. And, I used to have amazing writing capabilities. I've always been a writer. And once he started making us use it, I then felt like, well, maybe ChatGPT can give me, a good idea for this story. And I started asking, what would be a good idea for, a murder mystery or something like that. And I lost my reliability in my own mind to be able to come up with new ideas, and I've gained it back. I've cut off my ChatGPT for myself, thankfully, but these students are becoming so reliant on it, and the technology, in all of my math classes, it would just be a quick, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how you do it for like 5 minutes, and then automatically get on your computer. I'm going to tell you, I witnessed every single person in my last math class AI everything, because it's not blocked on the computers, and you can just cheat on absolutely everything. It is a problem. And not to mention, with your computers, you just hide your phone behind your computer and, do what you want. I feel like it's really, really bad for students to have access to. So when it comes down to the 1-to-1 ratio, it's like, I don't even think that it's worth it anymore. You know, I personally feel like the public school system has failed me because of technology. There were several instances where I asked to be able to use pen and paper. No, because it's easier for the teachers to be able to grade on the computer. All of the assignments were on computer. Almost all of them. It was so rare when I had a pencil and paper assignment. And I would even get excited when I had a pen and paper assignment, you know? And I even had a teacher whom would make us get off of our laptops for about 5 minutes because, you know, kids are getting migraines and because we're on the computers all day long. We're losing our capabilities and we're becoming so reliant on technology. I know so many students who aren't even capable of being able to formulate a proper sentence or when to use a comma or when to use a semicolon. And so then when we start, you know, forcing students to use things like Grammarly, and it tells them when to put a comma or a semicolon in, it's like, how are they ever going to learn? How are they ever going to learn to be able to do those things for themselves? Not to mention, it is scientifically proven that when you handwrite things, you are going to memorize them better and you're going to understand what you're talking about a lot more better than when you're typing it.
Ms. Wall, we have a question here. Co-chair?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. First of all, thank you for being here. I cannot recall having someone of your age talk about this issue to any committee that I've been. So I really appreciate you being here. And I know it's sometimes intimidating to be in front of a group like this. So I think some people might say, not me, do you have an agenda? You know, do you have so my question to you is, with your friends in school, other people in school, do they have the same view as you? Is this something that you've heard from your peers? And then the other question I have is, okay, what recommendations do you have? I mean, you're dealing with a committee here that potentially has the power of the purse. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Yes, thank you very much. So when it comes to my friends and a lot of my peers, I've had several peers say that they dislike the computers, that they dislike, you know, the use of AI and how reliant we've become on it in the school system. I've had lots of friends that have a lot of migraines from the heavy use of the computers. I even got diagnosed with chronic migraines by my neurologist and had to stop. And it it really just depends. I know people on both sides of it. You know, the people who like technology is so awesome, it's the future, and we need to know how to use it. Which, yes, I agree with that. But we've become so reliant on it. We need to be able to formulate a sentence with, you know, a pencil and a piece of paper. There are peers on both sides of it, but I personally know more students that are against technology than they are for it within the school system. As for what I would recommend, you know, I would be more extreme with it and I would say no to one-to-one. No, I would just get rid of technology altogether within school. I know that's unrealistic. But maybe to even go just to computer labs, but not even, I'm almost thinking, what would we even use them for? And everyone says, well, testing. Why don't we just bring, you know, SAT, ACT back to pencil and paper, you know? And I know you know, maybe unrealistic, but I personally am not in favor of the use leaving them in the computer cart, even for high schoolers, especially for middle schoolers and for elementary school kids.
you have these huge technology companies that they provide services that are useful, but they built in incentives into these services to keep you addicted to them, right? So whether it's Facebook, but even these chatbots, right? The chatbots always end their summary with a new question because they want to continue to keep you engaged in the chatbot. So I'm curious, probably around when you were in 6th grade, we put in computer science as part of the basket of goods. So I think regardless, as long as we have that in there, we're going to have to figure out how we teach kids computer science, and that will require technology in some sort. And so I think getting rid of technology, you're right, is kind of off the table as long as that's in the basket of goods. I think the question that I have for you is, do you think that there are ways where we can limit the use of these giant services to mitigate probably the worst of these policies? And even President Biden was talking about, these big publishing companies have leverage over us because we can't do a market where we only get paper textbooks. The market exists now where if you aren't a giant player, you can't influence the fact that we can go back to textbooks versus digital. Are there ideas that you would have us put into the school system where we can limit the worst aspects of the technology while still keeping the useful aspects of these tools where we can use them for learning?
Yeah, so first thing I would say is go back to computer labs, one class at a time. And, I know that the school district has the power to ban certain apps and whatnot. I think that ChatGPT should be banned and any AI use should be banned completely within the school system. I know that it sounds amazing and can give you all these great ideas. It is way too addicting and it's much too, I don't know what the right word is. It really, really does scramble your brain essentially. And that is something way too impactful for someone whose prefrontal cortex isn't even fully developed yet to be able to use and have at their fingertips 24 hours a day, and yeah, so I would say computer labs, and banning things, just banning certain websites, because I know that you guys can do that, that the districts can do that. That's honestly what I think would be more effective.
Okay, Representative Kelly. Oh, okay. Any others?
There's one more thing I'd like to add that I forgot to mention. My little sister is 11 and she was sent home with her very first laptop in 1st grade. I think that that is far too young. And obviously it sounds like a lot of other districts don't do that, but mine did. And all those kids were sent home with laptops. And I think that that's weird. So, and I think that that's too much responsibility. So I think that children that young should not be sent home with technology like that.
Thank you, Ms. Wall, for your compelling testimony. Appreciate that. Okay. Oh, we have one online. Senator Beitman, do you have your hand up?
I did. I wanted to catch her before she sat down because
She's not very far away.
okay. Sorry. I think, Mr. Chairman, that was great to hear from an actual customer, a recent customer of our education system. And you touched on something that, kind of ties into my previous question this morning about the big education tech companies and how they've weaseled their way into Wyoming and, got their programs into the schools, forced us to buy more Chromebooks or whatever the technology is. And then you touched on it, your experience with the teaching and how teachers have kind of used technology as a crutch and how that's affected your education. Can you expand more on that? What recommendations do you have for us as policymakers to maybe help that? Because I do see it as a problem when not only does the technology take away your ability to learn how to think, it also kind of becomes a tool, a crutch for teachers to maybe not teach as much as they would normally one-on-one with the students and just say, open your computers, try to figure out your math on your own, and that's it. And then they don't have to grade papers anymore because everything's done on the computer. Expand on that because I think it's a very important topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Beitman. That is a very loaded question, and I wish I had all the answers. When it comes to math specifically, I think that that is where we have failed tremendously within the public education system when it comes to technology. I think that math is one of those topics where you can't just give a kid a computer and say, watch this video and figure it out. I think that that's something that needs to be more of a lesson, one-on-one lesson taught thing where a teacher is walking you through it. And when you have a question, you're like, hey, please come help me. Because in my experience, I feel like I did not get that. When I did have one teacher who was very hands-on, and I really appreciate him, but all my other math, it was just go to the computer, go figure it out, you know? And then when asking, it just like, for help, it didn't feel like I was really getting help. And I'm going to be so honest, I am probably way farther behind on my grade level math that I should be at than I really am. I'm behind. And that's something that I see like a lot with my peers is they're behind in their math. And so for talking about policy, I would say that maybe there should be some sort of policy where, and I don't even know how you'd go about this, but with math specifically, where it has to be more hands-on or textbook or something, not just online all the time, you know, because we're seeing our math scores decline. And I wonder why, you know, like I wonder why, because we're just shoving our kids off and not actually trying to learn them, to teach them to learn. And when it comes to other subjects, though, I feel like with ELA, we would do most things on paper, and that was really good. The only things that we did on computer were, again, I was a senior, and we still had to go back and we had to do things teaching us when to use a semicolon or a comma, because most kids at 17, 18 didn't know how to use a semicolon and a comma. And we had to go on the computer and we had to do these little games on, you know, semicolons and commas. And it was like a week-long unit because kids just could not get the hang of it. For policy, I just think that technology has done that essentially. And I think that we just need to lower the limit, you know, especially for high school and middle school students, because I just think that they have too much right now. And I really do think that that is the root cause of a lot of the issues that we have and a lot of the lower test scores.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. Seeing no further testimony, thank you for, as a citizen, being in front of this committee. I hope people realize the impact that citizen testimony has on legislation.
Thank you.
Okay.
Scott Stoltz, Superintendent, District 2 in Sheridan. Thank you for this opportunity. I want to share a couple things. First, starting by, we learned a lot of things through COVID, one of which is that technology is not going to replace the teacher. That is not going to happen. Yet when we returned, we also didn't throw technology out and say that this does not have a place. We know that in the field of education, sometimes the pendulum swings to extremes. And generally speaking, when they go to extremes, that's typically not a very good thing. I think it's about balance. And I think very importantly in this scenario, it's about purpose. It's about how do we choose to use technology. Through all of the testimony, it's clearly articulated that there is a place for technology. We realize that. And it's also part of our responsibility as K-12 educators is to help provide our students an education in how they can purposefully use technology. And please understand that as a superintendent walking through our K-12 schools, it is not being taught by computers. I don't walk into a classroom and see kids staring at a screen for 50 minutes. That is not happening. Teachers are teaching, teachers are engaging. It is about providing relevance and it's about providing relationships, and our teachers teaching students learning. It's not done by technology. Technology is a tool, truly. Also, part of our responsibility is how do we engage all students? Our responsibility is to teach every student. We know that all of us in this room learn differently. It is also providing different ways to engage students. Some through technology is absolutely a means to help them. Is it the primary learning tool? Absolutely not. But it is a resource that we could choose to use to engage our students? Of course it can. It is our responsibility, which I firmly believe we do as educators, is to reflect and say, is it enhancing learning? Are we seeing an increase? Is it providing a benefit for our students? And if it isn't, then we need to either eliminate it or reduce it, or find a reason for using it. And I believe that in education in Wyoming, we are. And when we look at data, data tells a story. We can say that it impacts test scores, it negatively impacts this, it negatively impacts this, it positively impacts this. We look at other communities, we look at other states, we look at other districts. But the reality is this, when I look at YTOP data, because the point was, let's primarily focus on elementary school. When I look at YTOP data across the state in the last 4 years, and I'm including 2026, granted, it is currently draft data at this point. It's memorialized, et cetera. But when I look at the last 4 years of third grade ELA, those scores have increased. When I look at fourth grade ELA, those scores have increased. When I look at fifth grade data, those scores have increased. So is technology truly deteriorating and declining our test scores in YTOP? It is not. It is not. Can our test scores get better? Of course they can. But I don't think we can say that technology is a detriment to our student learning. If it's the sole purpose of teaching, yes, that is unacceptable. But I firmly don't believe that if we walk through classrooms in the state of Wyoming, we're seeing technology teach our students. I firmly believe, and I can speak again specifically to District 2, our teachers are teaching our kids. We're using technology as a tool, as a resource to support and enhance, and in some cases engage, but in a minimal amount. At the elementary level, our students have technology on a cart. They do not go home. There was also a question posed about virtual learning regarding snow days. First of all, it is rare. It'll take a foot of snow and probably 50-mile-an-hour winds for us not to be in school. But if we were, we do not have virtual days. We do make those days up. But I would certainly answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any questions? Question from Senator Chairwoman Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you mentioned Senator, excuse me, I almost called you Senator Stultz, Superintendent Stultz. I mean, we've been changing, things all day today, but you mentioned your elementary students, their usage. What about middle school, high school? Could you talk about that for just a little bit?
I sure will. Chair Heiner and Senator Schuler, at the junior high, which is 6 through 8, we do have one-to-one technology. Those students do have a Chromebook. They do not go home. They leave them at school and then they bring them the next day. But again, it's not them walking in the classroom, opening the computer and say, students, we're going to learn on the computer today. No, it's not. It's a support, it's a resource, it's a tool. At the high school, the students have them on a cart. They have them assigned to them. Those also do not go home.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Michael Reed and I serve as the Technology Director for Park County School District Number 1 in Powell. I've worked in educational technology for 34 years, including 27 years in Wyoming schools. I'm here today to share an observation from having worked through every major school finance recalibration and technology staffing model over the past 25 years. When many of Wyoming's technology staffing assumptions were first developed, technology in schools was largely focused on classroom support. A technology problem often involved a projector, a printer, or a computer lab. Today, technology supports nearly every district operation: instruction, student information systems, payroll, transportation, school safety systems, special education services, communications, state reporting, and cybersecurity all depend on technology functioning reliably and securely. 25 years ago, my staff primarily supported classroom technology. Today, we also support cybersecurity, student data systems, payroll, transportation, school safety, and dozens of cloud-based applications that are essential to daily district operations. Over time, Wyoming has appropriately expanded its expectations for digital learning, cybersecurity, accountability, data systems, and operational technology. Yet the staffing assumptions supporting school technology may not have evolved at the same pace as these responsibilities assigned to the technology departments. My purpose today is not to advocate for a specific funding level, staffing ratio, or legislative outcome. Rather, I respectfully ask the committee to consider a simple question. Do the technology staffing assumptions contained in Wyoming Schools funding model still align with the responsibilities technology staff are expected to carry today? If the answer is yes, that finding would be valuable. If the answer is no, the legislature would have objective information available for future consideration. For that reason, I am respectfully asking consideration of a working group, which includes legislators, school finance experts, districts leaders, technology directors, to evaluate whether current staffing assumptions remain aligned with current expectations. After nearly 3 decades serving Wyoming schools, I believe this review would both be reasonable and consistent with Wyoming's long-standing practice of revisiting resource assumptions as responsibilities evolved. Thank you for your time, for your consideration, and for your service to the people of Wyoming. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Senator Ruffus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thanks for being here today and having this discussion. We had an opportunity to chat during the interim as well, and I appreciate that. Can you talk to us a little bit about maybe one layer deeper on your staffing concerns? You and I have had that discussion. I think it's kind of important to understand what the model has now and has basically had for quite a number of years relative to what I'd say the reality on the ground is in your experience. And you've got an extensive experience that has demonstrated that those responsibilities have grown. So maybe just a little bit of depth.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss. If we only considered ed tech, I would be the happiest tech director here. It's about all the other slices to the pie. So keeping my classrooms up and running is relatively straightforward, or used to be. Speaking to door security, we outsource door security installations. But what you as a user see as door security, swiping a badge to get into your hotel room, swiping a badge to get into your building, for me is a series of power supplies, ISC boards that run out to 1320 controller cards that go out to each door. In English, every time we outsource, we get different boards, we get different installers, we get different behavior in the doors. So one year when we get door installation in and there's a power outage, someone could actually get locked in the freezer in the kitchen because the mag release is set to normally closed. My job is to make sure those things don't happen. In transportation, we have to work with fuel systems where some of the fuel systems are still on modems. I don't know how many of you remember modems like I do. Those were the days. But trying to get modern computers to hook to older modems takes time. For school security for SROs, we have camera systems deployed. We had an incident where there was an individual who was visiting from the West Coast who decided to just liberate materials from people's homes, their cars, in our school. We were able as a department to go through massive amounts of video footage, both from cell phones and from the camera systems, and actually print out the person's face for the local police department. Across the entire model, we have been limited to 2.6 FTE. That becomes because we are at a 1,750 roughly ADM for our school district. We've been consistently between 1,700 and 1,800 for the last 30 years. We're funded based on ADM, but the workload has increased exponentially.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Follow up. And thank you for that. So I ensure that I'm hearing what you're saying. The concern you have, we've been talking obviously about one-to-one, heavily focused on number of devices and how that should roll out. Your experience is that what you work on, while those laptop devices are certainly a portion of it, and if there's plenty of them, you've got plenty of work to do. The reality is that your non-device related infrastructure has grown so tremendously and your obligations have grown so tremendously that the personnel side of it is really what we should be looking at and focused on more than the technology side. Is that an accurate summary of your thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, I think they're tethered together. If the committee tells me that I only need to worry about classroom technology, 2.6 FTE is perfect. But if the expectation is that we also do compliance, that we do cybersecurity as we would if we were a Department of Homeland Security educational sector, then I do need more staffing. I understand that every district is unique. So to speak about what we're talking about currently, we have iPads in K through 2, they don't go home. We have Chromebooks 3 through 5, they don't go home. Those devices are library media devices. They're checked out from the library to the teachers. We target specific apps for specific teachers in specific schools. So our mobile device management system has to have that granularity going down. We offer teachers in the classroom content filter for their classroom for each period. That level of technology comes at a price. There's only 8 hours in a day, and we need to be able to provide those services as best we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Reed? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, Jeremy Smith, Sheridan District 1 Business Manager. I'll be very brief. I think this conversation has gone much more to policy instead of focusing on the proxy for the financial purpose you're here. One-to-one is a policy choice, but in this case, it's actually a proxy for giving us enough money to run technology systems, have the proper number of devices, whatever that is, because you don't have a component in the model that gives our adults technology, right? Like our maintenance guys, our teachers. So the one-to-one, we're having lots of conversation about whether that's good, bad, or indifferent. It's kind of irrelevant when it should be really just a funding proxy for what we need for the technology of all types in our buildings. And we could probably have a longer discussion like Mr. Reed was talking about is the staffing level to support the technology appropriate given the totality of the landscape of technology use in our district. So I just want to kind of bring the conversation back to the purpose is generating enough financial resources for districts to do their work. And a little bit less on the individual classroom policy choices of districts. So I just kind of wanted to get this back where I thought what the conversation should be about, which is generating financial resources for districts to do their jobs. So I stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
Shut off, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you. So let's get back to that. And I gave this comment before, I'll give it again. I would really like to hear testimony with regard to K through 5 and what that looks like on a one-to-one basis versus the alternative of a computer lab a cart. I would encourage testimony in that regard while we're here. So that's my 2 cents.
Oh, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Senator Brennan, please.
thanks. I do have a question for the last
Yes.
person, if I
Superintendent-
might.
Yes, go
ma'am.
ahead.
Thank you. But I really appreciate your thoughts in talking about how do we generate the right revenue and what that looks like, and also putting in that adults, because I do think that there is definitely a place that teachers all need a computer, and we know that with technology, well, I have the number to IT memorized at my work because it is just not my forte. And so I can appreciate that support staff that keeps all of those things up and running. If we were to look at that part as part of, because, mentioning the generating funds, and that's not necessarily in that, if we look at a 3-to-1, 1-to-1, 2-to-1 ratio, what recommendations then would you have on policy if we were kind of to look at what is it that teachers and staff need, and what does that support look like, either maybe per school or per district? I don't know on that end, recognizing that all of our districts are very different in what that IT support is going to look like based on their sizes, but I would just really appreciate your thoughts in that area.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, Senator Brennan, the 1-to-1 proxy for the $450 per ADM, that funding level, it does generate, I think, sufficient funds to allow districts to operate the totality of their technology system. I think we should have probably a deeper conversation on whether enough FTE is generated to support all of that technology on the personnel side. I guess in my mind, I was like, keep it simple. If you just assume 1-to-1 computers for every kid, that allows for the CAD labs to exist, because then, in a high school, that means then it's really like 1.25 computers to a kid, right? Kind of thing. So I like the simplicity of the 450 per ADM. That seems to work, and you inflate that properly and it's okay. But you certainly could make this far more complicated and go into like, okay, what kind of technology should we assume each teacher has? What kind of technology should we assume each administrator has? You could really get very specific in that, or just kind of keep it simple and allow districts to utilize that funding and deploy it in the ways that they need to. I always assumed that's what the funding model was giving enough resources to districts to make those individual policy and operational choices. So I just kind of wanted the committee to focus back in on that without trying to solve every district's specific need.
Yeah.
So that's my testimony, ma'am. Thank
you. Senator, any follow-up?
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, Senator Ruffus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But we need to be cost-based, and we need to analyze it in a way where we have a justification for specific expenses. And so a lot of what we're talking about is how is it going to look differently in an elementary school versus a middle school versus a high school? What does the district need? How many personnel do we need? So we can't just say $450 per student, in my opinion, and call that cost-based if we're not going to have a uniform policy. So I think the good co-chairman's question about K-5, we're sensing an inclination that it's done differently in elementary school than it is in the upper grades. And I think we need to understand if it's reasonable then for us to create a different cost basis for elementary school than we do in junior high and high school, which is my inclination at this point in time. That's where I'm being compelled towards. Personnel, we haven't heard a lot of testimony, but I did have an opportunity to talk to Mr. Reed previously, and I have a sense that we don't have enough personnel. Can you give us then, maybe addressing directly Co-Chairman Salazar's question, is that consistent with your district's experience also, that we're going to do things differently at the junior and high school, and how should we be focusing on that from a cost-based standpoint?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, I absolutely agree that we utilize technology differently at different grade bands. 100% true. And I think Dr. Jones may have spoken to it, but our elementary classrooms share carts, of iPads based on age, and they're on them very rarely, but they do have to have some sense of technology and its proper, use and efficient use in those grades. And certainly by the time they're in 6th grade through 12th grade, it's a 1-to-1. It's actually higher than that again, because every kid has the Chromebook, right? But then you'll walk into, the sports marketing class or international business class, or where they're producing the yearbook, and there's different, computers there for them. Walk into the AutoCAD lab, same thing, right? So yeah, I mean, really, truly, maybe you do want the consultants to dig very much deeper into this issue than they have, and make it less simple, right? To make a more cost-based, effective model. I totally understand that, and I think you should do that if that's what you want. But nobody is doing 1-to-1 kindergarten. That's just not what we're doing anymore. Or if you did, it was briefly during COVID, right? So I would agree that you could look at it by grade bands. It's very, very different at elementaries than it is middle schools and high schools. And so, yeah, complexity is good if you want that level of detail to it, but I was just trying to keep it simple for you. Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. We have about 10 more minutes before we have a hard deadline. We have a lunch appointment for nutrition. So let's keep focused. Please proceed.
Technology, gotta love it. Gotta turn it on. My name is Matt Ayers. I appreciate coming before you guys as a committee. I was recently appointed as a school board member at Lander Schools. I'm not here to speak as a school board member, but one thing I would say is that several board members are excited for some changes you made in the funding model that benefited teachers. They have some anxiety over some of the other limits on the funding model in the other categories. But what I'm here today to talk about is my day job, which is technology director at Fremont County School District number 38 in Arapahoe Schools. I've been there for 14 years. Give you an idea of our student count. We're really small, 407 students. Elementary school, about 250 kids. Middle school, about 120, and a really small high school of about 60 kids. So here's what I'd like to focus on, and I'll try to make it quick to get to our 10-minute mark. So in the funding model, if it's 3-to-1 funding for devices by ADM at $250 per ADM, that's for if you calculate it out at 407 students, that's $101,000. If it was a 1-to-1 funding, so $450 per ADM, that's $183,000. So that is a significant difference. $80,000 a small school district isn't peanuts, but the interesting thing to me is, I would chime in what Mr. Smith just said, is I don't understand why the focus is just on this. Because technology in a school environment is not just what people see. And maybe that's why we're talking about it. iPad or the Chromebook or the cell phone run by the cell phone company. We all have them. We all know there's a whole system behind the scenes to take care of them and make it run. So I want to talk about some of those things because there's a bigger picture. There's infrastructure to run it all, and there's staffing to run it. So, and those things are very expensive. Give you an idea, the servers at our school and storage array is about $100,000 value. We replace it about every 4 or 5 years. We also have a backup storage array, so if the one set goes down, that we can restore it to the other. And that's kind of good practice in the technology world, having redundancy so the operations keep running. And so you're looking at another $100,000 for that setup. We have expensive camera systems. We spent well past $500,000. We put cameras in the classrooms and all over campus. We do that to protect our teachers, to make sure that everybody's safe. If somebody makes a claim against the teacher, you actually can go and look at the data or, the video footage. There's lots of reasons we do that. Camera systems actually bought with a grant, so I'm not talking about the funding there, but we're left with maintaining those systems at Tech Directors. We support lock systems, which are hundreds of thousands of dollars. We do the support on that on the tech side. I have 16 servers, which have backups, Active Directory, run a DNS, DHCP. That's Tech Talk for handing out IP addresses to go to websites and translating website names like ebay.com to an IP address. We run locks locally on servers, HVAC systems. We have certain servers for EL testing and ACT testing. Sometimes those are required so that you reduce the bandwidth requirement. You cache the content for ACT testing on a server. I'll try to speed it up here. Network switches. In my little school, 407 kids, I have 50 network switches. And I have 94 Wi-Fi access points, okay? And you might ask, why do you have 94 access points for Wi-Fi in the schools? Well, as you start using better and better Wi-Fi technologies, those standards are different ranges how they reach. So as you move from standard B, G, N to AC, AX, BE, all Tech Talk, the better it gets, those ranges, they're faster, but often the scope of the coverage is smaller. So like it doesn't go through walls as easily. We support school information system and online enrollment. We have dozens and dozens of apps we support. Here's where I want to get to. So if you're talking about reimbursement or I guess funding at $101,000 at the 3-to-1 level, I'll give you a picture of what I spend in our district. And if you guys want more information, I'm glad to hand it to you. We spent $121,000 just in subscriptions. That isn't even, most of it isn't even student apps. Okay, give you some examples. Parent Square, a website and parent communication system, that's $7,500. Power School, online information system enrollment, it's $18,000. Our Proxmox, our virtualization system, $7,000 for our server infrastructure. Our absence management system, Red Rover, $22,000 a year. Our business office accounting system, $13,000 a year. Our Microsoft Office for the operating system, Microsoft Office and the CAL licenses for that, about $8,000 a year. Ransomware protection, we pay over 3 years, $25,000 over 3 years. So you can see my software, the ones I even mentioned, those are big costs, and a good portion of that $121,000 doesn't even touch really what we spend. So I'd ask you to consider that in future conversations. My budget outside of human resource side, FTEs, is $480,000. $121,000 is spent on subscriptions, and I named some of these here. They're not even student apps or software. Those are the things we support. So I'm hoping the conversation shifts away from this and we have like working group maybe or conversations in the future to fix some of those gaps. Of concerns about the funding model for most of the school districts are not given funding for a tech director. They're incorporated in the central office. And unfortunately, I think some of the tech is going to get the short end of the stick on that. Okay. So I'm hoping that at least there's a recognition that tech is important and there's a minimum amount that's needed for FTEs. So I got other comments, but since I probably went too long, we'll just stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Hare. Senator Ruffus.
Yeah, quick question. So I think you said $22,000 for the software for absence for 407 students. Is that correct per year?
Yeah, absence is for staff, not for students. So staff, you take vacation leave and those kind of things. Yeah.
So it's not even tracking student absences. You've probably got different software to track student absences for $22,000 a year.
Yeah, that's built in Power School.
Okay, and what was Power School? That was $20,000 a year?
Well, it's separated out and I don't think
I think you said Power School.
well, it's about
It was 18,
18,000 and I think the online enrollment piece is right above 10,000 and the remainder is the SIS itself. So I think it's 8,000-ish for the SIS and about 10,000 for the online enrollment.
Those build up, obviously, and I think that gets to what Senator Blankman was saying a little while ago about how we do a great job of subscribing to a lot of subscriptions, and then we find what that software as a service costs monthly or annually. So $124,000 for 400 students, and that's not even the student side software.
Yep, 121,000. There's a few components that are student software. I don't think we have time for it,
Yeah,
but
that's fine.
it's just minuscule out of that 121,000.
Thank you.
We actually spend out of the curriculum budget to pay for student apps, which is separate than that.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Let's move along.
Kate Sostowis, Technology Director of Fremont 25 Riverton. I echo my colleagues who are calling for a closer look at technology staffing and what we need to do in order to support all of the systems that the state has funded very well over the years. And I just wanted to highlight an issue that hasn't been brought up yet, which is student information system and data. So our district is responsible for reporting 32 different reports to the Department of Ed, and 13 of those reports fall under my department, either because they come from Power School and SIS, or my SIS manager is responsible for submitting those reports. And I want to give one anecdote here. During the legislative session, you guys were looking at how many technology staff members there were. A Department of Education employee sent all of the tech directors the spreadsheet that was used by the legislature. And our district was listed as 11 staff members in the tech department. And I looked at it and I was like, well, there's not 11 of us. Let me figure this out. We dug into it. Looks like that report came from the 650, 652 staffing collection. And 5 of those 11 are actually in my department, but that doesn't include myself or my SIS reporting manager. It's 5 technicians. The other 6 were teachers and paras who have a full-time job as being a teacher or para, and they get a $2,000 stipend to be the building tech, just the first line of defense. I can't print. I don't know how this works. Come hook up this. It's not that we didn't fill out the report correctly. It's that there's no correct way to fill out the report for that circumstance. So when the LSO pulls numbers or the Department of Ed provides numbers, our numbers were reported incorrectly. And what I'm getting to is that data and the data that the legislature and the Department of Ed requires from school districts in order to make these good decisions is complicated. And we have to have staff that understand that data, can provide it, can make sure it's accurate, can pick it apart when it's not accurate or we just don't feel like it's right. And that isn't reflected in the model. And that goes back to what Mr. Reed said and Mr. Ayers said, is a working group to really kind of dig into the staffing issues. And I echo Mr. Reed. If all I had to do was support classroom technology, man, the funding model right now is perfect, but that's not everything I support.
Well, thank you very much. Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you please reiterate how many reports you said you had to fill out and if there was any duplicative information or overlap in those reports?
So our district is responsible for approximately 32. And who is responsible for those reports and where the data is pulling from? 13 of those are within my department. Most of the rest of them are with the business office. But 13 of the 32 I'm directly responsible for because the data is pulling from the SIS, which for us is Power School, or the person who has the expertise to make sure that the data is accurate is housed in my department, my database manager, my SIS manager. As far as overlap, The Department of Ed has done a really good job over the years of trying to reduce overlap, and we don't have as many reports as we used to, or the reports are less complex. But that, I have to say, ebbs and flows. Sometimes we add things that are a little excessive. Sometimes we take things away. So it's not linear over time. It changes depending on, a lot of times, the asks of the legislature.
Co-chair, Mr. Co-chair, nothing? Okay. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
We have, well, Senator Beitman has a question for you. I didn't see his hand up. Sorry, Senator Beitman.
Hey, no worries. Thank you, everybody. The talk about, why are we talking about computers and not more in depth on staffing? Well, that's because Judge Fuliker decided we're going to talk about computers and one-to-one, and not necessarily talk about these other things. I would love to talk about, the previous speaker mentioned a working group. I agree with that. Let's look at the whole of, paying for technology and making sure we get it right. But I would just remind the audience that we're talking one-to-one computer ratios because the judge told us to. So just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right. The last one before lunch.
All right. Thanks for the opportunity. Charles Oskey, Superintendent, Johnson County School District number 1. And basically, I'm up here to say ditto to a majority of the stuff, but answer your questions, Senator Salazar, with what we're doing in our elementaries. So per our administrators, less than 10% of the entire day is with any type of screen time. JK does not use screens at all. K2 really is all about the reading horizons, assessments, and interventions that we are doing. So in that process, I want to paint another picture of what we're doing in Johnson County. We're also doing project-based learning. That has been one of our key focuses that we've done through 2 revs and the governor's ride with what we're doing in our elementaries to do more hands-on projects, but still aligning that to stay accountable with Wyoming accountability. So through our elementaries, they do look different. And I want to clearly identify the elementary is going to look different than the high school. But I need to add that other category that you guys have heard a lot here. It's about the district infrastructure, our HVAC, our facilities, what we do with our cameras, our securities, what we do to manage our people, whether it's through Red Rover, through our software management business. Our overall system, our cost to our district is about $500,000, and we generate through this about 50% of that. So looking at that big infrastructure picture is probably more of what we need to do. But educationally, to answer your concerns, coming back to that, that is a focus. And I think there's a picture out there that we're all behind the screens all the time. That's not necessarily the case. So we're all trying to really focus on what's important for kids, and it is quality instruction. But there are a lot of things we're doing, even with the literacy bill, that are going to be tied to technology. I'm going to be honest with you, our state assessment pieces. The other part that I haven't heard anybody talk about is concurrent and dual enrollment. You're going to see a majority of those courses at the high school are going to be online courses for our kids to take college classes and what that looks like. So there's a lot more opportunity for screen time than there was 10 years ago, even after COVID. So I appreciate everything that you're doing. It's just a quick summary, hopefully to answer your questions, and I'll let everybody go to lunch.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for the effort. Thank you for educating us. I will tell you that the K through 5 grades are something that I think we're talking about. So the opportunity is available for you to do that, and you've done it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. With that, we will recess for lunch. We will meet back here at 1:30 to talk about activities. Thank you, everyone.